The Deathwatch stands as the most specialized fighting force within the Imperium's vast military apparatus, a brotherhood of warriors drawn from across the Adeptus Astartes to serve a singular purpose: the eradication of Xenos threats wherever they emerge. Unlike the great Space Marine chapters that wage war across entire sectors, the Deathwatch operates in the shadows, deploying kill teams of exceptional warriors to surgical strikes that can determine the fate of worlds. Their black armor marks them as something apart from their parent chapters, a visible symbol of their commitment to the Long Vigil and their service to the Ordo Xenos of the Holy Inquisition. The formal establishment of the Deathwatch occurred in the 32nd millennium, following the catastrophic War of the Beast. That conflict saw the Imperium brought to its knees by the largest orc invasion in recorded history, with the greenskin warlord, known as the Beast, leading a war of unprecedented scale directly to the gates of Terra itself. The Xenos threat proved so overwhelming that it took the combined might of multiple Space Marine chapters, the mobilization of entire Imperial Guard armies, and the desperate intervention of the High Lords of Terra to finally break the orc advance. The lessons learned from that near-apocalyptic war were burned into the institutional memory of the Imperium's leadership. The Inquisition, already maintaining informal relationships with various Space Marine chapters for specialized Xenos hunting operations, recognized the need for a permanent, dedicated military force that could respond to alien threats with the precision and lethality that only the Adeptus Astartes could provide. The Watch Fortress on Thalassa Prime became one of the first permanent installations of the newly formalized Deathwatch, though other strongholds existed across the Imperium in regions where Xenos incursions posed constant threats. These fortress monasteries served as staging grounds, armories, and training facilities where battle brothers from different chapters learned to fight alongside warriors whose combat doctrines, traditions, and even gene seed origins differed radically from their own. A space wolf accustomed to close quarters ferocity would find himself operating alongside an ultramarine whose tactical flexibility emphasized adaptation and strategic withdrawal when necessary. A dark angel, burdened by his chapter's secretive nature, would stand shoulder to shoulder with a blood angel, whose gene seed curse drove him toward berserk fury in the heat of battle. The Long Vigil represents far more than simple secondment to another military organization. When a battle brother is selected by his chapter master to serve in the Deathwatch, he undertakes a sacred oath that binds him to service for a duration determined by the needs of the Ordo Xenos and the approval of his parent chapter. This period typically spans several years, though some warriors serve for decades, and a rare few never return to their original chapters at all, instead choosing to extend their service indefinitely or even taking the black permanently. The oath itself is sworn before both the watch commander of the fortress, to which the battle brother is assigned, and representatives of the Ordo Xenos, creating a binding commitment that supersedes even the authority of his chapter master for the duration of his service. The spiritual significance of this oath cannot be understated. Space Marines are conditioned from their earliest days as scouts to view their chapter as the ultimate expression of their identity and purpose. The chapter's heraldry, its battle honors, its unique traditions and combat doctrines, these elements form the core of what it means to be a Space Marine. To set aside that identity, to paint over the colors and symbols that have defined a warrior's entire existence, represents a profound sacrifice. The black armor of the Deathwatch becomes a new identity, one that acknowledges the battle brother's origins through the retention of his chapter's insignia on his right shoulder pauldron, while simultaneously declaring his commitment to a higher calling. The left shoulder bears the silver icon of the Deathwatch itself, the stylized skull and crossbones set within a watch face that has become synonymous with Xenos' extermination across the Imperium. The command structure of the Deathwatch reflects its unique position as the chamber militant of the Ordo Xenos. Unlike standard Space Marine chapters, which maintain rigid hierarchies based on company organization and established chains of command, the Deathwatch operates with considerable flexibility. Watch commanders hold authority over individual watch fortresses, overseeing the training, deployment, and strategic coordination of all kill teams operating from their installations. These commanders are invariably veteran warriors who have served extended tour with the Deathwatch and demonstrated not only exceptional combat prowess, but also the diplomatic acumen necessary to manage warriors from dozens of different chapters, each bringing their own traditions, prejudices, and tactical preferences. Beneath the watch commanders serve the watch captains, officers responsible for the direct oversight of multiple kill teams and the execution of specific operations within designated regions of space. A watch captain might coordinate the activities of 5 or 6 kill teams simultaneously, directing them against different aspects of a larger Xenos threat, or deploying them to multiple worlds within a single sector to counter an emerging alien incursion. The position requires intimate knowledge of Xenos species, their behaviors, technologies, and tactical patterns, combined with the ability to assess which combination of battle brothers will prove most effective against specific threats. The relationship between the Deathwatch and the Inquisitor Lords of the Ordo Xenos operates on principles of mutual respect and carefully negotiated authority. The Inquisition maintains ultimate authority over the strategic deployment of Deathwatch forces, with individual Inquisitors possessing the right to request kill team support for investigations or operations falling within their purview. However, the Watch commanders retain significant autonomy in determining how those requests are fulfilled, which warriors are assigned to specific missions, and the tactical execution of operations once deployed. This balance prevents the Deathwatch from becoming merely another tool for ambitious Inquisitors to wield according to their personal agendas, while ensuring that the organization remains responsive to the Inquisition's broader strategic needs. Inquisitors working closely with the Deathwatch often develop long-standing relationships with specific watch commanders or even individual battle brothers whose expertise proves particularly valuable. An Inquisitor specializing in Tyranid threats might regularly request the same kill team, whose members have extensive experience fighting the Hive fleets, building tactical familiarity and operational trust over multiple deployments. Conversely, watch commanders maintain the authority to refuse requests they deem strategically unsound or tactically wasteful, though such refusals must be justified through careful documentation and consultation with senior inquisitorial leadership. The operational independence of the Deathwatch distinguishes them fundamentally from standard Adeptus Astartes chapters. A typical chapter maintains its own fleet, recruits from specific worlds, and prosecutes campaigns according to its own strategic priorities, subject only to the broadest directives from the High Lords of Terra or direct requests from the Inquisition. The Deathwatch, by contrast, exists in a state of permanent mobilization, its warriors already detached from their parent chapters and available for immediate deployment. Kill teams can be assembled, briefed, and dispatched within hours of an Inquisitor, identifying a Xenos threat requiring their intervention, a responsiveness impossible for conventional chapter forces that might be engaged in campaign sectors away. This rapid deployment capability stems partly from the Deathwatch's distributed network of watch fortresses and watch stations scattered throughout the Imperium. Rather than concentrating their forces in a single fortress monastery like a traditional chapter, the Deathwatch maintains dozens of major installations and hundreds of smaller outposts, each garrisoned by battle brothers drawn from multiple chapters and equipped with specialized weapons and equipment designed specifically for Xenos extermination. A watch station in the Ultima Segmentum might house only a dozen battle brothers, but possess armories stocked with anti-Tyranid bioweapons, while a watch fortress near the Ghoul Stars maintains extensive collections of archaeotech, specifically calibrated to counter the abominable intelligences that emerge from that cursed region. The doctrinal flexibility of the Deathwatch represents another crucial distinction from standard chapter operations. Space Marine chapters develop combat doctrines refined over millennia, tactical preferences that become as much a part of their identity as their gene seed. The White Scars favor lightning strikes and mobile warfare. The Imperial Fists excel at siege warfare and defensive operations. The Raven Guard specialize in stealth and infiltration. The Deathwatch must integrate all these approaches, creating kill teams whose members can adapt their individual combat styles to support collective tactical objectives. A veteran sergeant from the Crimson Fists might lead a kill team whose members include a salamander with expertise in flame weapons, a storm warden trained in boarding actions, and a marine errant whose marksmanship proves invaluable for precision elimination of Xenos leaders. The architectural philosophy underlying Watch Fortress construction reflects the dual nature of the Deathwatch's mission. These installations must serve simultaneously as impregnable bastions capable of withstanding sustained Xenos assault, and as research facilities housing some of the most dangerous alien specimens and artifacts in the Imperium. Unlike the fortress monasteries of standard Space Marine chapters, which often incorporate elements of their homeworld's culture and aesthetic traditions, Watch Fortresses follow standardized design principles established during the organization's formalization in the 32nd millennium. These principles prioritize defensive redundancy, specimen containment integrity, and rapid deployment capability above all other considerations. The typical Watch Fortress occupies a strategic position within its operational theater, selected for maximum coverage of surrounding systems and proximity to known Xenos infiltration routes. Many fortresses maintain orbital positions above key Imperial worlds, their weapon batteries and lance arrays providing planetary defense, while their hangar bays facilitate immediate kill team deployment. Others occupy hardened surface installations on fortress worlds or asteroid bases within strategically vital systems. The placement calculations involve extensive coordination between the Ordo Xenos, the Deathwatch's own strategic planning councils, and Imperial Navy command structures, as each fortress requires reliable supply lines and communication relays to maintain operational effectiveness. The defensive architecture of these installations incorporates lessons learned from millennia of Xenos warfare. Void shields generated by multiple redundant arrays provide primary protection against orbital bombardment and ship-to-ship weapons fire. Beneath these energy barriers, adamantium-reinforced walls several meters thick incorporate internal support structures designed to maintain integrity even after sustaining catastrophic damage. Gun emplacements positioned in overlapping fields of fire ensure that no approach vector remains undefended, with weapon systems calibrated to counter specific Xenos threats prevalent in each fortress's operational region. A Watch Fortress near Tau space might prioritize long-range anti-aircraft batteries, capable of intercepting crisis suit teams and hammerhead gunships, while installations facing Orc territories emphasize massed firepower capable of breaking greenskin assault waves. The interior layout of Watch Fortresses follows functional rather than ceremonial logic. Training halls occupy significant portions of the structure, providing environments where battle brothers from different chapters practice coordinated tactics and learn to compensate for each other's combat styles. These halls incorporate modular terrain systems capable of simulating diverse battlefield conditions, from the fungal jungles of orc-infested worlds to the biomechanical corridors of Tyranid hive ships. Armories stock not only standard Astartes weapons, but specialized equipment designed specifically for Xenos extermination. Xenophase blades that disrupt alien molecular structures, Infernus heavy bolters loaded with Hellfire rounds containing mutagenic acids, and Stalker pattern bolt guns equipped with specialized ammunition for each major Xenos species. The xenobiology wings of Watch Fortresses represent some of the most heavily secured sections of these installations. Here, tech marines and apothecaries work alongside inquisitorial savants and sanctioned xenologists to study captured alien specimens, dissecting their physiologies to identify exploitable weaknesses and cataloging their capabilities for inclusion in tactical databases. Containment cells constructed from layered ceramite and reinforced plastic house living specimens, each cell designed with redundant security measures and fail-safe termination protocols. A containment breach in these sections could doom the entire fortress, as many specimens possess capabilities that make them existential threats even in isolation. Genestealer patriarchs, H-Rud time manipulators, and enslaver parasites require containment protocols so stringent that even battle brothers accessing these sections must undergo extensive decontamination procedures and psychic screening. Watch Fortress Iriok stands as perhaps the most significant Deathwatch installation in the Jericho Reach, a massive space station of ancient and partially mysterious origin. The fortress occupies a position that allows monitoring of multiple warp routes into the region, making it an ideal staging ground for operations throughout the Reach. Archaeological evidence suggests portions of Iriok predate the Imperium itself, with some sections displaying architectural characteristics inconsistent with human construction. The Deathwatch claimed the station during the Achilles Crusade, recognizing its strategic value for coordinating anti-Xenos operations in a region plagued by multiple alien threats including Tau expansion, Tyranid infiltration, and Orc incursions. The structure of Iriok incorporates both the ancient core sections and extensive Imperial modifications. The original station's architecture features corridors and chambers built to proportions suggesting non-human builders, with some passages requiring even space marines to stoop, while others soar to heights that seem purposeless by human standards. The Deathwatch has repurposed these spaces according to their needs, converting vast chambers into training halls and hangar bays, while sealing off sections deemed too unstable or containing phenomena that resist Imperial understanding. Tech priests assigned to Iriok have spent decades attempting to fully comprehend the station's power generation systems, which operate on principles that challenge conventional understanding of plasma reactor technology. The fortress maintains permanent garrisons of battle brothers drawn from chapters across the Imperium, with typical strength fluctuating between 80 and 120 warriors, depending on operational tempo and casualty rates. These warriors staff multiple kill teams simultaneously deployed throughout the Jericho Reach, responding to inquisitorial requests and prosecuting independent operations against identified Xenos threats. The Watch Commander of Iriok holds authority over a region of space encompassing dozens of systems, coordinating not only Deathwatch operations, but also maintaining liaison relationships with Imperial Guard regiments, Navy battle groups, and local planetary defense forces operating in the Reach. Watch Station Midil represents a different architectural approach, constructed as a purpose-built Imperial installation rather than adapted from pre-existing structures. Located in a region facing constant Tyranid pressure, Midil's design emphasizes rapid deployment capability and specimen containment for hive fleet organisms. The station maintains extensive xenobiology laboratories specifically equipped for Tyranid study, with containment cells incorporating biosuppression fields that inhibit the synaptic connections linking individual organisms to the hive mind. Apothecaries stationed at Midil have developed extensive expertise in countering Tyranid bioweapons, cataloging the effects of various hive fleet toxins, and creating antidotes that have saved countless Imperial lives across multiple war zones. The garrison strength at Midil typically numbers between 40 and 60 battle brothers, a smaller force than major Watch fortresses, but still capable of fielding multiple kill teams simultaneously. The station's strategic value lies less in its size than in its specialized knowledge base and the expertise of its permanent staff. Battle brothers serving at Midil undergo intensive training in anti-Tyranid warfare, learning to recognize the behavioral patterns of different hive fleet organisms and mastering the specialized tactics required to combat an enemy that adapts and evolves in response to Imperial strategies. Many warriors who complete tour at Midil return to their parent chapters as recognized experts in Tyranid extermination, their knowledge proving invaluable when their chapters face hive fleet incursions. The fortress on Thalassa Prime holds particular historical significance as one of the oldest Deathwatch installations, predating even the formal establishment of the organization in the 32nd millennium. The fortress occupies a fortified position on a world that has witnessed Xenos incursions spanning millennia, with archaeological evidence suggesting alien presence dating back to the Dark Age of technology. The Deathwatch presence on Thalassa Prime evolved from informal arrangements between the Inquisition and various Space Marine chapters into a permanent installation that served as a template for later Watch fortress construction throughout the Imperium. Talassa Prime's fortress incorporates extensive archive facilities, housing records that document Xenos encounters across thousands of years. These archives contain tactical assessments, biological studies, and strategic analyses compiled by generations of battle brothers and inquisitors. The librarium sections maintain climate-controlled vaults where ancient texts survive in conditions that prevent degradation, with access restricted to battle brothers holding appropriate clearance levels and inquisitors whose investigations require historical context. Some documents within these archives predate the Horus Heresy, representing knowledge preserved through the darkest periods of imperial history. The Apocryphon of Davio represents one of the most significant and controversial collections within Watch Fortress archives. This compilation of forbidden xenology texts and classified threat assessments contains information deemed too dangerous for general distribution even within the Deathwatch itself. The Apocryphon documents encounters with Xeno species, whose very existence remains classified at the highest levels of inquisitorial authority, including detailed accounts of alien civilizations possessing technologies that challenge fundamental imperial understanding of reality. Access to the Apocryphon requires authorization from both a Watch commander and an Inquisitor Lord of the Ordo Xenos, with all consultations monitored and documented. The contents of the Apocryphon include comprehensive studies of Xeno species that have since been exterminated or driven into extinction, preserving knowledge that might prove vital should these species somehow resurge. Detailed anatomical diagrams illustrate the physiologies of aliens whose biological structures defy conventional understanding, while tactical analyses document the combat capabilities and strategic behaviors of species that posed existential threats to entire sectors before their eradication. Some entries within the Apocryphon describe Xenos artifacts recovered from dead civilizations, objects whose functions remain incompletely understood despite decades of study by tech priests and xenologists. The most disturbing sections of the Apocryphon catalog encounters with alien entities that seem to operate outside conventional physical laws, beings whose presence induces psychological effects in human observers, or whose technologies manipulate fundamental forces in ways that suggest either impossibly advanced science or something that transcends scientific explanation entirely. These entries receive the highest classification levels, accessible only to Watch commanders and Inquisitor Lords investigating specific threats that might relate to documented phenomena. The Deathwatch maintains strict protocols regarding this information, recognizing that knowledge of certain Xenos capabilities could prove as dangerous as the aliens themselves. Watch stations serve as the forward operating bases that extend Deathwatch reach into contested regions, where full fortress installations would prove impractical or strategically unnecessary. These smaller facilities typically garrison between 10 and 30 battle brothers, sufficient to maintain several kill teams, while avoiding the resource requirements and visibility of major fortresses. Watch stations occupy diverse locations, ranging from fortified positions on frontier worlds to concealed bases on uninhabited moons, with placement determined by the specific operational requirements of their regions. The architectural standards for Watch stations emphasize concealment and defensive efficiency over the imposing presence of major fortresses. Many stations incorporate stealth technologies that mask their signatures from orbital detection, allowing them to maintain observation of Xenos' threatened regions without attracting attention that might provoke preemptive alien strikes. Defensive systems focus on deterrence and delay rather than prolonged resistance, as Watch stations rely on their small size and strategic positioning to avoid becoming targets for sustained assault. Should a station face overwhelming attack, evacuation protocols prioritize preserving personnel and critical intelligence over holding territory. The coordination between watch stations and local Imperial forces follows carefully established protocols that balance operational security with tactical necessity. Station commanders maintain communication with planetary governors, Imperial Guard command staffs, and Navy battle group leaders, providing intelligence on Xenos movements and coordinating responses to emerging threats. However, the Deathwatch maintains operational independence, with station commanders retaining authority to decline requests for assistance that would compromise ongoing operations or expose kill teams to unnecessary risk. This independence occasionally generates friction with local Imperial authorities accustomed to requisitioning military assets according to their own strategic priorities, requiring diplomatic skill from station commanders to maintain productive working relationships while preserving Deathwatch autonomy. The ancient compact that binds the Adeptus Astartes to the Deathwatch originated in the aftermath of the War of the Beast, when the Inquisition formalized arrangements that had previously existed as informal agreements between individual chapters and Ordo Xenos operatives. This compact establishes the Tithe of Blades, an obligation requiring every Space Marine chapter to provide veteran warriors for secondment to the Deathwatch when requested. The Tithe operates outside the normal structures of Imperial authority, representing instead a mutual recognition that Xenos threats require specialized responses beyond what individual chapters can provide while prosecuting their own campaigns. Chapter masters retain authority to select which battle brothers they second to the Deathwatch, but they cannot refuse the Tithe itself without risking censure from both the Inquisition and their fellow chapters. The selection process for Deathwatch candidates varies significantly between chapters, reflecting different organizational cultures and strategic priorities. Most chapters view Deathwatch service as an honor, selecting veterans who have proven themselves across multiple campaigns and demonstrated the tactical flexibility required for operating in mixed chapter kill teams. A typical candidate possesses at least several decades of combat experience, having served in his chapter's tactical, assault, or devastator squads, and often having held sergeant rank or equivalent positions of battlefield leadership. Some chapters specifically select battle brothers who have already encountered Xenos threats, reasoning that warriors with direct experience fighting orcs, tyranids, or other alien species will adapt more quickly to the Deathwatch's specialized mission parameters. The psychological requirements for Deathwatch service extend beyond simple combat prowess. Battle brothers must demonstrate the mental flexibility to set aside chapter prejudices and work effectively alongside warriors from chapters whose doctrines, traditions, and even genetic heritage differ fundamentally from their own. A space wolf selected for the Deathwatch must prove capable of operating under the command of an ultramarine sergeant without allowing traditional rivalries to compromise mission effectiveness. A Dark Angel must show willingness to fight alongside Space Wolves, despite the ancient animosity between these chapters stemming from conflicts during the Horus Heresy. Chapter librarians and chaplains conduct extensive psychological evaluations of candidates, assessing their capacity for adaptation and their commitment to the broader Imperial cause over chapter-specific loyalties. Specialized skills factor heavily into selection decisions, as watch commanders constantly require battle brothers with particular expertise to counter specific Xenos threats. A chapter might second a tech marine with extensive experience maintaining and operating rare equipment patterns, knowing that watch fortresses maintain arsenals of specialized weapons requiring technical knowledge beyond standard Astartes training. Apothecaries with xenobiology experience become valuable assets for watch stations conducting specimen analysis and developing countermeasures to alien bioweapons. Veterans trained in boarding actions and void warfare prove essential for operations against spacecraft belonging to Tau, Eldar, or other technologically sophisticated Xenos species. Chapters sometimes receive specific requests from watch commanders seeking battle brothers with particular capabilities, though the chapter master retains final authority over which warriors answer these requests. The ceremonial transition from chapter service to the Deathwatch follows protocols established over millennia, rituals that acknowledge both the honor of selection and the sacrifice inherent in setting aside chapter identity. The selected battle brother first undergoes a period of preparation within his chapter's fortress monastery, during which he settles his affairs and receives final blessings from his chapter's chaplains. This preparation period allows the warrior to achieve psychological closure on his service to his parent chapter, understanding that his return remains uncertain and that some battle brothers never resume their original identities, instead serving the Long Vigil until death claims them in battle against the Xenos. The journey to a watch fortress or watch station marks the beginning of transformation. Upon arrival, the battle brother presents himself to the watch commander and swears the oath of the Long Vigil, a binding commitment that supersedes his chapter oaths for the duration of his service. The oath itself varies slightly between watch fortresses, incorporating local traditions while maintaining core elements that appear in all versions. The warrior pledges to serve the Ordo Xenos faithfully, to prosecute the Emperor's war against alien threats without hesitation or mercy, and to honor his battle brothers in the Deathwatch as he would his chapter brothers. Inquisitors attached to the fortress often witness these oath-taking ceremonies, their presence reinforcing the connection between the Deathwatch and the broader inquisitorial apparatus. The repainting of armor represents the most visible aspect of joining the Deathwatch, a transformation laden with symbolic significance. Chapter serfs and tech marines work together to strip the battle brothers' armor of its original colors, removing the heraldry and honor markings that identified him as a member of his parent chapter. The armor receives new coats of matte black ceramite, a color chosen both for its tactical advantages in stealth operations and its symbolic representation of the Deathwatch's singular purpose. Only the right shoulder pauldron retains its original chapter colors and insignia, a deliberate exception that acknowledges the battle brother's origins while emphasizing his new identity. The left shoulder receives the silver Deathwatch insignia, the skull and crossbones within a watch face that has become synonymous with Xenos extermination across the Imperium. This repainting process requires several days of meticulous work, as tech marines must ensure that the new finish maintains the armor's protective qualities while achieving the uniform appearance expected of Deathwatch warriors. Some battle brothers find the transformation psychologically difficult, watching as the colors they have worn with pride for decades disappear beneath black ceramite. Others embrace the change, viewing it as liberation from the weight of chapter history and an opportunity to forge new legends. The armor modification extends beyond simple repainting, as tech marines often install specialized equipment required for Deathwatch operations, including enhanced auspex systems for detecting Xenos organisms, modified Vox units for coordinating with kill team members from different chapters, and mounting points for mission-specific weaponry. The Vigil of Preparation occurs after the armor transformation, a period of solitary contemplation during which the battle brother meditates on his new responsibilities and prepares himself mentally for the challenges ahead. Watch fortresses maintain dedicated chambers for these vigils, Spartan cells equipped with only the most basic amenities. The battle brother spends anywhere from 1 day to 1 week in isolation, depending on watch fortress traditions and the urgency of operational requirements. During this time, he reviews tactical data on Xenos species he will likely encounter, studies the combat doctrines of chapters whose members he will fight alongside, and contemplates the nature of the Long Vigil itself. Chaplains assigned to the Deathwatch sometimes visit warriors during their vigils, offering spiritual guidance and answering questions about what service in the organization truly entails. Chapter attitudes toward Deathwatch service span a wide spectrum, reflecting the diverse cultures and priorities of the Adeptus Astartes. Ultramarines and their successor chapters generally embrace Deathwatch secondment enthusiastically, viewing it as an opportunity to demonstrate the superiority of Codex-compliant doctrine and to spread Robute Guilliman's tactical wisdom to warriors from less organized chapters. The Ultramarines maintain one of the highest rates of Deathwatch participation among all chapters, regularly seconding veteran sergeants and specialists to watch fortresses throughout the Imperium. Many Ultramarine successors follow this example, with chapters like the Genesis chapter and the Nova Marines viewing Deathwatch service as a proving ground where their battle brothers can demonstrate tactical excellence alongside warriors from less disciplined organizations. The Imperial Fists and their successors similarly view Deathwatch service positively, recognizing it as an extension of their duty to defend the Imperium against all threats. The stoic temperament characteristic of Dorn's gene line adapts well to the Deathwatch's mission parameters, as these warriors excel at maintaining discipline and focus even when operating far from their chapter's support structures. The Crimson Fists, despite their reduced numbers following the catastrophic losses at Rin's World, continue to honor their Deathwatch commitments, understanding that the tithe serves broader Imperial interests even when the chapter desperately needs every available battle brother for its own reconstruction efforts. The Blood Angels and their successor chapters approach Deathwatch service with careful consideration, balancing their willingness to serve against concerns about the red thirst and black rage that afflict their gene line. Chapter masters must select warriors who demonstrate strong resistance to these genetic flaws, as a battle brother succumbing to the black rage while serving in a mixed chapter kill team could compromise not only the mission, but also the Blood Angels' carefully guarded secrets. Despite these concerns, the Blood Angels maintain their tithe obligations, recognizing that failure to do so would invite unwanted scrutiny from the Inquisition. The chapter sometimes seconds battle brothers to watch fortresses in regions where Tyranid threats predominate, reasoning that warriors familiar with fighting monstrous Xenos organisms will prove particularly effective against Hive fleet forces. The Space Wolves represent one of the more complicated relationships with the Deathwatch, as the chapter's fierce independence and rejection of Codex Astartes' doctrine sometimes conflicts with the organization's emphasis on tactical flexibility and inter-chapter cooperation. The Wolves fulfill their tithe obligations, but they carefully select warriors who can operate effectively outside the pack structures that define Space Wolf combat doctrine. These selected warriors often come from the Long Fangs, veteran gray hunters whose decades of experience have taught them to adapt their fighting styles to different tactical situations. Space Wolves serving in the Deathwatch maintain their chapter's traditions as much as circumstances permit, though they must moderate their more boisterous behaviors when working alongside battle brothers from chapters that value discipline and formality. The Dark Angels and their successor chapters maintain the most complicated relationship with the Deathwatch, as their obsessive hunt for the fallen creates conflicts with their tithe obligations. The Inner Circle carefully screens all battle brothers selected for Deathwatch service, ensuring that warriors seconded to the organization either remain ignorant of the fallen or possess the psychological discipline to maintain the chapter's secrets even when operating alongside outsiders. Dark Angels serving in the Deathwatch have occasionally abandoned their kill teams mid-mission upon receiving intelligence about fallen presence elsewhere, a behavior that has generated significant friction with Watch commanders and raised questions among Inquisitors about the chapter's true priorities. Despite these complications, the Dark Angels maintain their tithe, understanding that failure to do so would invite exactly the sort of inquisitorial investigation they desperately wish to avoid. More insular chapters like the Marines Malevolent and the Mortifactors comply with Deathwatch requirements reluctantly, viewing the tithe as an unwelcome drain on their combat strength. These chapters sometimes second warriors who have fallen out of favor with their leadership or who possess skills less valuable for the chapter's specific operational requirements. Watch commanders have learned to recognize when chapters send unsuitable candidates, occasionally refusing to accept battle brothers who clearly lack the psychological flexibility or specialized skills necessary for effective service. Such refusals create diplomatic complications, as chapters can claim they fulfilled their tithe obligations even when Watch commanders reject their candidates as unsuitable. The Black Templars present unique challenges for Deathwatch integration due to their crusading nature and their organization into autonomous crusade fleets rather than standard company structures. The chapter maintains its tithe obligations despite these organizational differences, with martial commanders selecting veteran sword brethren for secondment when their crusade routes bring them near watch fortresses. Black Templar warriors serving in the Deathwatch bring intense zeal and close-quarters combat expertise, though their preference for aggressive assault tactics sometimes conflicts with the more measured approaches favored by kill teams facing technologically sophisticated Xenos species. The command hierarchy of the Deathwatch reflects its unique position as both a space marine organization and the chamber militant of the Ordo Xenos, creating a structure that balances military efficiency with the political realities of coordinating warriors from dozens of different chapters. At the apex of each watch fortress stands the Watch Commander, typically a veteran who has served multiple tours with the Deathwatch and demonstrated not only exceptional combat prowess, but also the diplomatic acumen necessary to manage warriors whose loyalties remain divided between their parent chapters and their current service. The Watch Commander holds authority over all operations conducted from his fortress, coordinates with Inquisitor Lords of the Ordo Xenos, and maintains relationships with Imperial Navy Battle Group commanders and Astra Militarum leadership throughout his operational theater. The selection of Watch Commanders follows no standardized process across the organization, as each Watch Fortress maintains its own traditions regarding leadership succession. Some fortresses elevate their most senior Watch Captain to command upon the death or retirement of the previous commander. Others convene councils of veteran battle brothers who vote on candidates from among qualified warriors currently serving at the installation. The Ordo Xenos maintains advisory input into these selections, but cannot directly appoint Watch Commanders, as the Deathwatch jealously guards its internal autonomy even while serving as the chamber militant. Inquisitor Lords can express preferences for particular candidates or voice concerns about unsuitable warriors, but the final decision rests with the Deathwatch itself. Watch Commanders typically serve until death or until injuries render them incapable of effective leadership, as few warriors who reach this rank possess any desire to return to their parent chapters. These veterans have spent decades or even centuries in Deathwatch service, their identities so thoroughly merged with the organization that resuming their original chapter affiliations would feel like abandoning their true brothers. Some Watch Commanders maintain ceremonial connections to their parent chapters, receiving occasional visits from chapter representatives or sending reports on Xenos threats that might affect their chapter's operational theaters, but these connections grow increasingly attenuated as years of service accumulate. The administrative burden of commanding a watch fortress extends far beyond simple military leadership. Watch Commanders oversee the fortress's logistical operations, ensuring adequate supplies of specialized ammunition, maintenance of rare equipment patterns, and coordination with Mechanicus representatives who provide technical support for the installation's most esoteric weapon systems. They manage relationships with the Inquisitors who regularly requisition kill team support, balancing competing demands from multiple Ordo Xenos operatives, while ensuring that available forces deploy according to strategic priorities rather than the personal preferences of individual Inquisitors. They coordinate with Imperial Navy fleet elements to secure transportation for kill teams deploying to distant systems, negotiate with planetary governors whose worlds host watch stations, and maintain communication with other watch fortresses to share intelligence on emerging Xenos threats. Beneath the Watch Commander serve the Watch Captains, officers who hold direct responsibility for specific operational theaters within the fortress's area of authority. A typical watch fortress maintains between 3 and 6 watch captains, depending on the size of its operational region and the intensity of Xenos activity within that space. Each watch captain oversees multiple kill teams simultaneously, coordinating their deployments against different aspects of larger Xenos threats, or directing them to separate systems within a subsector where alien activity requires immediate response. The position demands intimate knowledge of Xenos species, their behavioral patterns, technological capabilities, and tactical preferences, combined with the ability to assess which combination of battle brothers will prove most effective against specific threats. Watch captains maintain considerable autonomy in executing the missions assigned to their operational theaters, selecting which kill teams deploy to particular objectives, and determining the tactical parameters under which those teams operate. A watch captain coordinating operations against a Tau expansion effort might deploy a Venator kill team to eliminate Firecast leadership, while simultaneously dispatching an Aquila team to destroy the Xenos supply infrastructure supporting their advance. The same watch captain could redirect a Proteus kill team from one objective to another mid-operation if intelligence reveals a more critical target requiring immediate attention, trusting the team's tactical flexibility to adapt to changing mission parameters without requiring detailed instructions. The authority of watch captains extends beyond simple military command to include requisitioning Imperial Navy assets, Astra Militarum support, and even planetary defense forces when operations require capabilities beyond what kill teams alone can provide. A watch captain prosecuting operations against an Orc incursion might request Navy bomber wings to suppress greenskin air defenses before inserting a kill team to eliminate the warboss coordinating the invasion. Another watch captain facing Tyranid infiltration across multiple worlds could requisition guard regiments to establish containment perimeters, while kill teams conduct search and destroy operations against Genestealer cult cells. These requisitions operate through established protocols that grant watch captains significant authority while requiring them to justify resource allocation to both their watch commander and the inquisitors overseeing operations in their theaters. The Librarius of the Deathwatch maintains the Librarium Xenos, an archive of psychic phenomena associated with alien species, and a repository of esoteric knowledge that would see most Imperial citizens executed for possession. Librarians serving in the Deathwatch come from chapters across the Imperium, each bringing unique psychic traditions and specialized techniques developed by their parent chapter's Librarius. A librarian from the Blood Ravens arrives with extensive knowledge of psychic lore and artifact identification. A Space Wolf Rune Priest brings shamanic traditions and techniques for resisting chaos corruption that differ fundamentally from Codex-compliant psychic disciplines. An Ultramarine librarian contributes systematic approaches to cataloging Xenos' psychic abilities and developing countermeasures based on established theoretical frameworks. These librarians must set aside the doctrinal differences that separate their parent chapter's psychic traditions and collaborate on studying alien psychic phenomena that threaten the Imperium. The Librarium Xenos contains detailed analyses of Eldar Farseers and their divination abilities, examinations of Orc Weirdboys and the psychic gestalt field that empowers them, studies of Tyranid hive mind connections and the synaptic creatures that maintain these links, and classified reports on more obscure Xenos species whose psychic capabilities defy conventional understanding. Librarians assigned to watch fortresses spend significant time studying these archives, expanding their knowledge of alien psychic threats and developing new techniques for countering abilities that Imperial psychers rarely encounter elsewhere. The combat role of Deathwatch librarians extends beyond simple psychic support for kill teams. These warriors serve as specialists in countering Xenopsychers, employing techniques specifically developed to disrupt alien psychic abilities rather than the general anti-psyker methods taught to most Imperial librarians. A librarian deployed against Eldar forces might focus on disrupting the aliens' precognitive abilities, forcing them to fight without the foresight that normally grants them overwhelming tactical advantages. The same librarian facing Tyranid forces would shift his focus to severing synaptic links between individual organisms and the hive mind, creating confusion within bioforms that depend on central coordination for effective combat performance. The Librarium Xenos also maintains records of Xenos artifacts that possess psychic properties or that interact with the warp in ways that suggest psychic manipulation. These catalogs document items recovered from dead Xenos civilizations, objects whose functions remain incompletely understood despite decades of study. Some artifacts demonstrate abilities that seem to violate known laws of physics, suggesting either impossibly advanced technology or genuine manipulation of warp energies through non-human methodologies. The librarians tasked with studying these items must balance their desire to understand alien capabilities against the very real dangers of corruption or mental contamination that exposure to Xenos' psychic artifacts can inflict. The Reclusium of the Deathwatch serves a more complex function than the chaplaincies of standard Space Marine chapters, as Deathwatch chaplains must preserve the spiritual purity and combat effectiveness of kill teams composed of warriors from chapters whose religious traditions, combat doctrines, and even fundamental beliefs about the Emperor's nature differ radically. A chaplain might find himself ministering to a kill team that includes an Imperial fist who views the Emperor as a transcendent but fundamentally human figure, a Black Templar who worships the Emperor as a literal god, and a Space Wolf who follows the traditions of Fenris while paying lip service to Imperial creed orthodoxy. The chaplain must find common spiritual ground among these divergent beliefs while maintaining the doctrinal purity expected of his office. Chaplains assigned to the Deathwatch typically possess extensive experience managing the spiritual needs of diverse warrior populations, often having served in their parent chapter's Reclusium for decades before secondment to the organization. They bring their chapter's liturgical traditions, but must adapt these practices to accommodate battle brothers whose own traditions might conflict with or contradict their home chapter's beliefs. A chaplain from the Dark Angels must moderate his chapter's obsessive focus on penitence and redemption when ministering to warriors from chapters that emphasize different spiritual values. An Ultramarine chaplain must recognize that not all battle brothers view the Codex Astartes as semi-sacred text deserving reverence approaching religious devotion. The practical responsibilities of Deathwatch chaplains extend to monitoring battle brothers for signs of spiritual corruption or psychological deterioration that might compromise their effectiveness. Warriors serving in the Deathwatch face unique stresses that differ from those encountered in standard chapter service. The isolation from their parent chapters, the constant exposure to Xenos threats that challenge fundamental assumptions about reality, and the necessity of working alongside battle brothers whose combat doctrines might seem heretical by their home chapter's standards, all create psychological pressures that can erode even veteran warriors' mental stability. Chaplains conduct regular spiritual counseling sessions with battle brothers, assessing their psychological state and providing guidance that helps warriors maintain their sense of purpose and identity despite the challenges inherent in Deathwatch service. The Apothecarian maintains gene seed protocols that represent one of the most sensitive aspects of Deathwatch operations, as the organization must balance its obligations to preserve the genetic legacy of every chapter that contributes warriors against the practical realities of operating in conditions where recovering fallen battle brothers' progenitor glands proves impossible. Apothecaries serving in the Deathwatch come from diverse chapters, each trained in their parent chapter's specific gene seed protocols and familiar with the unique characteristics and potential flaws of their chapter's genetic heritage. These apothecaries must learn to work with gene seed from chapters whose genetic material they have never previously encountered, understanding the variations between different gene lines and the specific monitoring requirements each demands. The gene seed of fallen Deathwatch battle brothers belongs to their parent chapters, not to the Deathwatch itself, creating administrative complexities when warriors die in service to the Long Vigil. Apothecaries prioritize recovering progenitor glands from fallen battle brothers whenever tactical circumstances permit, understanding that each set of glands represents irreplaceable genetic material necessary for their parent chapter's continued existence. Watch fortresses maintain specialized preservation facilities where recovered gene seed undergoes testing to ensure purity before being returned to the appropriate chapter. This process can take months or even years, as apothecaries must verify that exposure to Xenos bioweapons or other alien contaminants has not corrupted the genetic material. The medical expertise of Deathwatch apothecaries extends beyond standard Astartes battlefield medicine to encompass treatment of injuries inflicted by Xenos weapons and organisms whose effects differ fundamentally from conventional wounds. An apothecary treating a battle brother exposed to tyrannid bioacids must understand how these compounds interact with Astartes physiology and which counter agents prove most effective at neutralizing ongoing tissue damage. The same apothecary treating wounds inflicted by Necron Gauss weaponry faces entirely different challenges, as these weapons disintegrate matter at the molecular level in ways that resist conventional medical intervention. Apothecaries assigned to watch fortresses spend significant time studying xenobiology and developing treatment protocols for injuries that Imperial medical doctrine rarely addresses. The Forge of the Deathwatch houses tech marines whose expertise extends beyond standard equipment maintenance to encompass the care and operation of specialized weapons designed specifically for Xenos extermination. These tech marines come from chapters across the Imperium, each having completed their training on Mars and received the blessing of the Omnissiah before returning to their parent chapters. Their secondment to the Deathwatch represents a significant sacrifice, as most chapters maintain relatively small numbers of tech marines and depend heavily on these warriors to maintain their equipment and vehicles. Despite this sacrifice, chapters recognize that the Deathwatch requires technical expertise to maintain its arsenals of specialized equipment, and they honor their obligations to provide tech marines when requested. The weapons maintained by Deathwatch tech marines include patterns rarely seen outside the organization's armories. Xenophase blades incorporate technologies that disrupt molecular bonds in Xenos organisms, making them particularly effective against heavily armored alien species. Infernus heavy bolters fire specialized ammunition containing acids and toxins calibrated to penetrate the chitinous armor of tyrannid bioforms or the crystalline structures of certain Necron constructs. Stalker pattern bolt guns equipped with sophisticated targeting systems allow battle brothers to engage Xenos leaders at extreme ranges, eliminating enemy command structures before they can coordinate effective resistance. Tech marines must understand the function and maintenance requirements of dozens of specialized weapon patterns, each designed for specific tactical applications against particular Xenos species. The kill team represents the fundamental operational unit of the Deathwatch, a small formation of battle brothers selected for complementary skills and equipped for specific mission parameters. Unlike the rigid squad structures of Codex-compliant chapters, kill teams demonstrate considerable flexibility in composition and organization, with watch captains assembling teams according to mission requirements rather than predetermined organizational templates. A typical kill team numbers between 5 and 10 battle brothers, sufficient to provide tactical flexibility while maintaining the small footprint necessary for the covert operations that characterize much Deathwatch activity. Strike teams represent the most specialized kill team configuration, composed entirely of veterans equipped with specialized weapons and trained for specific tactical roles. These teams deploy when missions require overwhelming firepower concentrated against particular targets, with each battle brother carrying heavy weapons or specialized equipment rather than the mixed loadouts typical of more flexible kill team configurations. A strike team tasked with destroying a Tau research facility might include battle brothers equipped with meltaguns for breaching reinforced barriers, plasma guns for eliminating fire-cast defenders, and heavy bolters for suppressing enemy reinforcements. The entire team operates with singular focus on their primary objective, sacrificing tactical flexibility for concentrated combat power. Aquila kill teams follow Codex-compliant tactical squad organization, incorporating battle brothers equipped with standard bolters and a limited number of special weapons. These teams excel at sustained combat operations, where tactical flexibility matters more than specialized capabilities, allowing them to adapt to changing battlefield conditions without requiring equipment reconfiguration. An Aquila team might deploy with 8 Battle Brothers carrying bolters, one equipped with a plasma gun and another carrying a heavy bolter, providing balanced capabilities for engaging diverse threats. The Codex-compliant structure of Aquila teams makes them particularly effective for operations where Battle Brothers from different chapters must coordinate according to standardized tactical doctrine, as most chapters maintain at least basic familiarity with Codex principles, even if they do not follow them strictly. Dominion kill teams emphasize heavy weapons and sustained firepower, deploying when missions require suppressing large numbers of Xenos organisms or destroying hardened targets. These teams typically include multiple Battle Brothers equipped with heavy bolters, missile launchers, or other crew-served weapons, supported by Battle Brothers carrying standard bolters who provide security while their brothers operate heavy weapons. Dominion teams prove particularly effective against Tyranid swarms or Orc hordes, where concentrated firepower can eliminate dozens or even hundreds of Xenos organisms before they close to melee range. The composition of Dominion teams prioritizes firepower over mobility, accepting reduced tactical flexibility in exchange for devastating combat power. Venator teams specialize in assassination and leadership elimination, deploying when missions require killing specific Xenos leaders whose deaths will disrupt enemy coordination or demoralize alien forces. These teams emphasize stealth, precision shooting, and rapid extraction, with Battle Brothers equipped with stalker pattern bolt guns, sniper rifles, and other weapons optimized for long-range engagement. A Venator team tasked with eliminating a Tau commander might infiltrate near the target's position under cover of darkness, eliminate the target with precision fire, and extract before enemy forces can organize effective pursuit. The specialized nature of Venator operations requires Battle Brothers with exceptional marksmanship skills and the patience to wait for optimal firing opportunities rather than engaging targets of opportunity. Proteus kill teams represent the most flexible configuration, incorporating Battle Brothers with diverse specializations and equipment loadouts selected according to specific mission requirements. A Proteus team might include a tactical Marine from the Ultramarines, a Space Wolf Bloodclaw trained in close combat, a Salamander equipped with a flamer, a Dark Angel carrying a plasma gun, and an Imperial Fist with a heavy bolter. This diversity provides Proteus teams with capabilities to address unexpected challenges and adapt to evolving tactical situations without requiring external support. The composition of Proteus teams changes frequently, with watch captains assembling new configurations for each mission based on intelligence assessments and anticipated threats. The armories of the Deathwatch contain weapons and equipment that exist nowhere else in the Imperium, specialized tools of Xenocide, developed over millennia of warfare against every alien species that threatens humanity's dominion. While standard Space Marine chapters maintain impressive arsenals of bolt guns, plasma weapons, and power swords, the Deathwatch goes further, stockpiling ammunition types and weapon patterns specifically designed to exploit the physiological weaknesses of particular Xenos species. A Battle Brother deploying against Tyranids requires fundamentally different equipment than one facing Necrons or Tau, and the Deathwatch maintains the logistical infrastructure necessary to equip kill teams with precisely the tools their missions demand. The specialized ammunition stockpiled in Watch Fortress armories represents centuries of collaboration between the Deathwatch, the Adeptus Mechanicus, and the Ordo Xenos. Dragonfire bolts contain a pyrophoric core that ignites upon impact, creating thermal reactions that prove particularly effective against targets sheltering behind cover. The munitions were originally developed for urban warfare, where standard bolts might detonate against walls or barriers without eliminating the enemies sheltering behind them. Dragonfire rounds burn through cover materials and continue their thermal reaction on the far side, immolating targets that believe themselves protected. Against certain Xenos species, particularly those with chitinous armor or crystalline structures, the thermal effects of Dragonfire bolts create secondary damage, as the aliens' own protective coverings conduct heat into their bodies. Hellfire rounds contain vials of mutagenic acid derived from captured Tyranid bioweapons, a controversial ammunition type that employs Xenos materials against their creators. The acids contained within Hellfire bolts were synthesized by Magos biologists adepts studying Tyranid digestion fluids and the corrosive compounds that hive fleet organisms employ to break down consumed biomass. When a Hellfire round penetrates a target, the vial ruptures and releases acids that dissolve organic tissue with horrifying efficiency. The compounds prove especially effective against Tyranid bioforms, as the acids bypass the creature's natural resistances by mimicking substances their own biology recognizes as non-threatening. Orc physiology also proves vulnerable to Hellfire rounds, as greenskin regenerative capabilities cannot repair tissue damage inflicted by acids that continue dissolving flesh long after the initial impact. The development and use of Hellfire rounds generated significant debate within both the Deathwatch and the broader Adeptus Astartes. Some chapters view the ammunition as a pragmatic tool that turns Xenos' capabilities against their creators, an approach consistent with the Imperium's doctrine of employing any means necessary to secure humanity's survival. Other chapters express concern that utilizing Xenos' derived materials, even in weaponized form, represents a dangerous precedent that could lead to greater compromises with alien technology. The Ordo Xenos maintains strict oversight of Hellfire round production and distribution, ensuring that the ammunition remains available only to the Deathwatch and other organizations operating under direct inquisitorial authority. Kraken penetrator rounds sacrifice the explosive payload of standard bolts in favor of a solid adamantium core designed to punch through heavy armor. The rounds achieve higher velocities than standard bolts due to their reduced mass and streamlined profile, allowing them to penetrate armor that would deflect or absorb conventional munitions. Against heavily armored Xenos species like Necron warriors with their living metal bodies or Tau battlesuits with their sophisticated armor systems, Kraken rounds provide the penetration necessary to reach vital systems or organic components protected beneath multiple layers of protection. The rounds prove less effective against lightly armored swarm organisms like Tyranid hormagaunts or orc boys, as the penetrator design limits the round's ability to inflict the catastrophic tissue damage that standard explosive bolts create. Vengeance rounds represent the opposite design philosophy from Kraken penetrators, incorporating larger explosive charges that detonate with greater force than standard bolts. The increased blast radius makes Vengeance rounds effective against clustered targets, with a single round capable of eliminating multiple lightly armored Xenos organisms positioned near the impact point. The ammunition proves particularly valuable against Tyranid swarms or orc mobs, where enemies mass together in numbers that would overwhelm kill teams attempting to eliminate each target individually. The enhanced explosive charges in Vengeance rounds create overpressure waves that rupture internal organs even in targets not directly struck by shrapnel, extending the lethal radius beyond what the fragmentation pattern alone would achieve. Metal Storm frag shells convert bolt guns into area saturation weapons, firing shells that fragment into hundreds of micro-projectiles shortly after leaving the barrel. The fragmentation pattern creates a cone of lethal shrapnel that shreds everything within its area of effect, transforming a bolt gun into something approaching a shotgun spread pattern while maintaining greater effective range. Metal Storm rounds excel at engaging fast-moving targets like Eldar jetbikes or Tau drones, where the spread pattern compensates for the difficulty of tracking agile enemies with precision fire. The ammunition also proves effective in confined spaces like Hive ship corridors or Orc space Hulk interiors, where enemies might emerge from multiple angles simultaneously, and the spread pattern ensures that Battle Brothers can engage threats without requiring perfect target acquisition. The Deathwatch maintains supplies of all these specialized ammunition types across its watch fortresses and watch stations, with Tech Marines responsible for matching ammunition loadouts to anticipated threats. A kill team deploying against a Tyranid infestation might carry primarily Hellfire and Vengeance rounds, while a team tasked with eliminating Necron forces would prioritize Kraken penetrators. Battle Brothers typically carry mixed ammunition loads, with different magazine types marked for quick identification during combat. A veteran sergeant might carry standard bolts for general engagement, Hellfire rounds for organic targets, Kraken penetrators for armored enemies, and Dragon Firebolts for targets in cover, switching ammunition types as tactical situations evolve. Beyond specialized ammunition, the Deathwatch employs unique weapon patterns developed specifically for Xenos extermination. The Xenophase blade represents one of the most distinctive Deathwatch weapons, a power sword incorporating Archaeotech phase field generators that allow the blade to partially shift out of normal space-time during attacks. The phase effect enables the blade to pass through conventional armor as if it were not present, with the weapon's edge materializing inside the target's body and inflicting catastrophic internal damage. Against Xenos species with sophisticated armor systems or natural protective adaptations, Xenophase blades provide killing power that conventional power weapons cannot match. The technology underlying these weapons remains incompletely understood even by the Techmarines who maintain them, with the phase field generators incorporating components that suggest either dark age of technology human origin or possible adaptation of Xenos principles. The controversial nature of Xenophase blade technology has generated ongoing debate within the Mechanicus. Some tech priests argue that the weapons represent recovered human technology from the Dark Age, when humanity's scientific capabilities far exceeded current Imperial understanding. Others suggest that the phase field effect operates on principles suspiciously similar to technologies employed by certain Xenos species, raising uncomfortable questions about whether the weapons incorporate alien scientific concepts or actual Xenos components. The Deathwatch maintains that Xenophase blades represent sanctioned equipment approved by the Ordo Xenos for use against alien threats, and the weapon's effectiveness against heavily armored Xenos species justifies any questions about their origins. The Infernus Heavy Bolter modifies the standard Heavy Bolter platform by incorporating an underslung heavy flamer, creating a weapon system capable of engaging targets at both long and close range. The combination proves particularly effective against Tyranid swarms, where Battle Brothers can employ the Heavy Bolter to engage bioforms at range, while switching to the Heavy Flamer when creatures close to melee distance. The weapon's bulk and weight make it unsuitable for rapid maneuver warfare, but in defensive positions or during deliberate assaults where Battle Brothers can brace the weapon properly, the Infernus provides devastating firepower. Techmarines must carefully maintain the weapon's feed mechanisms, as the combination of bolter ammunition and promethium fuel systems in a single weapon package creates multiple potential failure points that could render the entire system inoperable. Deathwatch shotguns represent a significant departure from the standard Astartes arsenal, as most chapters view shotguns as weapons suited for mortal soldiers rather than space marines who can employ bolt guns effectively in close quarters. The Deathwatch recognizes that certain tactical situations favor shotguns over bolters, particularly when operating in environments where bolt detonations might cause unacceptable collateral damage, or when engaging targets at ranges where shotgun spread patterns provide advantages over precision fire. The Deathwatch pattern shotgun fires specialized shells including solid slugs for armored targets, fléchette rounds for unarmored swarms, and breaching charges for destroying barriers. Battle Brothers assigned to boarding actions or urban operations frequently carry these weapons, appreciating their versatility and the reduced risk of hull breaches or structural damage compared to liberal bolter fire. The frag cannon represents perhaps the most devastating close-range weapon in the Deathwatch arsenal, a massive weapon that fires either solid slugs or shells packed with thousands of razor-sharp fragments. When loaded with frag shells, the weapon creates a cone of destruction that shreds everything within its area of effect, turning densely packed enemy formations into clouds of blood and torn flesh. The solid slug mode provides armor-penetrating capability against hardened targets, with the massive projectiles possessing sufficient kinetic energy to punch through bulkheads or vehicle armor. The weapon's tremendous recoil requires the enhanced strength of power armor to manage effectively, and even Space Marines must brace properly when firing to maintain accuracy. Frag cannons prove invaluable during boarding actions against Orc space hulks or Tyranid hive ships, where enemies mass in confined corridors, and the weapon's area effect can eliminate dozens of Xenos organisms with single shots. The Deathwatch's willingness to employ sanctioned Xenos technology represents one of the most controversial aspects of the organization's operations, a pragmatic approach to warfare that many chapters view with suspicion or outright hostility. The Ordo Xenos maintains that certain Xenos technologies, when properly sanctified and employed under strict oversight, provide capabilities that justify the risks inherent in utilizing alien equipment. This position conflicts with the doctrinal purity that most Space Marine chapters maintain regarding Xenos materials, creating tension between the Deathwatch's practical approach and the ideological positions of many parent chapters. Inquisitors attached to the Deathwatch carefully screen all Xenos technology before authorizing its use, conducting extensive testing to ensure that alien equipment does not incorporate hidden mechanisms that could subvert Imperial forces or corrupt battle brothers exposed to its operation. Tech Marines assigned to Xenotech evaluation spend months or even years studying recovered alien devices, mapping their functions and identifying potential dangers. Equipment that passes these evaluations receives official sanctioning from the Ordo Xenos, allowing Deathwatch forces to employ the technology against Xenos threats. The sanctioning process includes ritual purification by chaplains, who perform ceremonies intended to cleanse the equipment of alien taint and dedicate it to the Emperor's service. The types of Xenos technology employed by the Deathwatch vary considerably depending on which alien species the equipment originated from and what tactical capabilities it provides. Tau weaponry, particularly plasma rifles and pulse carbines, occasionally sees use by Deathwatch forces after extensive modification to remove any systems that might report targeting data back to Tau networks. The weapon's sophisticated targeting systems and reliable performance make them valuable tools despite their Xenos origin, though battle brothers carrying such equipment face questions from warriors of more purist chapters about the wisdom of depending on alien technology. Eldar weapons prove more difficult to employ, as their psychically attuned nature often prevents non-Eldar users from accessing their full capabilities, though Deathwatch librarians have occasionally managed to activate recovered Eldar equipment through psychic manipulation. The most controversial Xenos technology employed by the Deathwatch involves equipment recovered from species whose very existence remains classified at the highest levels of inquisitorial authority. Watch fortresses maintain secure vaults containing devices whose functions remain incompletely understood, but whose effects prove valuable enough to justify continued study and limited field deployment. These artifacts operate under restrictions so stringent that only Watch commanders can authorize their use, and battle brothers deploying with such equipment must undergo extensive psychological screening and post-mission debriefing to ensure they have not suffered corruption or mental contamination. Power armor modifications specific to Deathwatch operations reflect the organization's focus on small unit tactics and Xenos extermination. Enhanced Auspex systems provide battle brothers with superior target acquisition capabilities compared to standard Astartes armor, incorporating specialized sensors calibrated to detect particular Xenos species. An Auspex system configured for anti-Tyranid operations might emphasize biosign detection and synaptic creature identification, allowing battle brothers to locate and eliminate the synapse organisms coordinating swarm behavior. The same system reconfigured for operations against Tau would prioritize electromagnetic emissions detection, helping battle brothers locate battle suits and drone controllers whose destruction would disrupt enemy coordination. The modular nature of Deathwatch armor allows Tech Marines to reconfigure equipment loadouts between missions, installing specialized systems according to anticipated threats. Boarding actions against space hulks might see armor equipped with mag-lock boots for zero-gravity maneuvering and reinforced life support systems for extended operations in hostile environments. Operations on death worlds infested with dangerous xenoforms could involve installing environmental seals against biological contaminants and enhanced air filtration to prevent exposure to alien spores or toxins. This flexibility distinguishes Deathwatch armor from the standardized configurations typical of most chapters, where Battle Brothers maintain consistent equipment loadouts optimized for their chapter's preferred combat doctrine. The silver left shoulder pauldron worn by all Deathwatch Battle Brothers serves multiple purposes beyond simple identification. The distinctive coloring makes Battle Brothers instantly recognizable to Imperial forces operating in the same theater, preventing friendly fire incidents and signaling the presence of elite Xenos hunters, whose tactical assessments should inform local command decisions. The pauldron's heraldry incorporates the Deathwatch insignia, the skull and crossbones within a watch face that has become synonymous with alien extermination across the Imperium. Many Battle Brothers personalize their pauldrons with kill markings, denoting particularly significant Xenos eliminations, though these decorations must receive approval from watch captains to ensure they meet organizational standards. The retention of chapter heraldry on the right shoulder pauldron maintains each Battle Brother's connection to his genetic and cultural heritage while serving the Long Vigil. This deliberate asymmetry in armor decoration serves as constant reminder that Deathwatch warriors remain members of their parent chapters even while serving under different colors and command structures. The practice helps Battle Brothers maintain their sense of identity during extended deployments far from their chapter's fortress monasteries, providing psychological anchoring that prevents the isolation and disconnection that might otherwise erode their effectiveness. When Battle Brothers eventually return to their parent chapters, the retention of their original heraldry facilitates their reintegration into their chapter's command structure and combat formations. The Tyranids represent an existential threat, unlike any other Xenos species the Imperium has encountered, a galaxy-devouring swarm that consumes entire worlds and leaves nothing but lifeless rock in its wake. The Hive fleets operate according to a collective intelligence so vast and alien that Imperial strategists struggle to predict their movements or counter their adaptations. Unlike orcs whose aggression follows recognizable patterns or Eldar whose actions serve comprehensible strategic goals, the Tyranids pursue only consumption, stripping planets of all biological matter to fuel their endless expansion across the galaxy. The Deathwatch has fought these creatures since the first tendrils of Hive Fleet Behemoth reached Imperial space in the late 41st millennium, and the organization has developed specialized doctrines for combating an enemy that learns from every engagement and evolves countermeasures to Imperial tactics with horrifying speed. The role of the Deathwatch in combating Tyranid incursions emphasizes early detection and rapid response before Hive fleet elements can establish the beachheads that make planetary infestation nearly impossible to eradicate. Deathwatch kill teams deploy to worlds showing signs of Genestealer cult activity, the insidious advance guard that prepares planets for consumption by establishing psychic beacons that guide Hive fleet vanguard organisms toward vulnerable targets. These operations require Battle Brothers to operate in urban environments where cult cells hide among normal Imperial citizens, identifying and eliminating infected populations before the psychic signal grows strong enough to attract the attention of orbiting bioships. The surgical nature of these missions demands restraint uncommon in space marine operations, as excessive collateral damage could trigger planetary panic that would aid cult objectives by creating chaos the infected can exploit. Once Hive fleet elements enter a system, Deathwatch operations shift toward threat assessment and targeted elimination of crucial organisms whose deaths will disrupt the swarm's coordination. Synapse creatures serve as nodes in the Hive mind's control network, providing the psychic linkage that allows the collective intelligence to coordinate individual bioforms with perfect efficiency. Warriors, Tyranid primes, and the massive hive tyrants function as these synaptic nexuses, their presence transforming mindless feeding organisms into coordinated military forces capable of sophisticated tactical maneuvers. Kill teams equipped with long-range weaponry deploy specifically to eliminate synapse creatures, with Venator teams using stalker pattern bolt guns and specialized ammunition to kill these priority targets from distances that prevent the surrounding swarm from responding effectively. The death of a synapse creature creates temporary confusion among nearby tyrannid organisms as they lose connection to the hive mind's guiding intelligence. Lesser bioforms revert to instinctive behaviors, attacking the nearest targets without coordination or tactical purpose. This window of vulnerability lasts only minutes before other synapse creatures move to fill the gap, or the hive mind establishes new control pathways, but skilled kill teams exploit these moments to eliminate dozens of lesser organisms or extract from positions that would otherwise become untenable. Watch captains coordinating anti-tyrannid operations maintain constant communication with kill teams in the field, directing them to eliminate synapse creatures in sequences that create cascading disruptions across entire swarm formations. The bioships that transport hive fleet organisms between star systems represent targets of strategic importance, as their destruction eliminates not only the creatures they carry, but also the genetic templates and biological resources the hive mind requires to spawn new organisms. These massive vessels grow rather than being constructed, their hulls composed of chitinous armor, and their interiors filled with spawning pools where new bioforms gestate. Deathwatch boarding actions against bioships rank among the most dangerous operations the organization conducts, as kill teams must fight through corridors filled with defensive organisms while locating and destroying vital ship organs that maintain the vessel's functions. The capillary towers that distribute nutrients throughout the ship, the synaptic ganglia that coordinate its flight and weapons, and the massive reproductive chambers where new organisms spawn all represent critical targets whose destruction can cripple or kill an entire bioship. Battle brothers conducting bioship boarding actions face environmental hazards as dangerous as the creatures defending the vessel. The atmosphere inside these ships consists of toxic spore-laden gases that corrode armor seals and infiltrate life support systems. The walls themselves secrete acidic compounds that burn through ceramite given sufficient exposure time. Sensory organs embedded in the ship's structure detect intruders and direct defensive organisms toward their locations with perfect awareness of kill team positions. Tech Marines assigned to these operations must constantly monitor armor integrity and life support functionality, as equipment failures in bioship environments prove fatal within minutes. The Deathwatch maintains specialized boarding equipment, including reinforced armor seals, enhanced air filtration systems, and chemical neutralizers that counter the acidic secretions coating bioship interiors. The Deathwatch's approach to combating orcs differs fundamentally from anti-tyrannid operations, as greenskin psychology and social structures create vulnerabilities that skilled kill teams can exploit to devastating effect. Orc society revolves around brutal hierarchies, where the largest and most aggressive individuals dominate their smaller kin through constant displays of violence and intimidation. Warbosses maintain control over WAs through personal combat prowess and the psychic gestalt field that all orcs generate collectively, a phenomenon that grows stronger as more greenskins gather in one location. This psychic field makes orc equipment function despite its ramshackle construction and reinforces the warboss's authority over his followers. The death of a warboss disrupts this hierarchy, triggering immediate power struggles as rival knobs compete to claim leadership through trial by combat. Deathwatch decapitation strikes against orc leadership exploit these social dynamics, eliminating warbosses at critical moments when their deaths will cause maximum disruption to greenskin military operations. A WA-building momentum toward assaulting an imperial world becomes vulnerable when its warboss dies, as the resulting power struggle diverts orc attention from external enemies toward internal competition. Kill teams tasked with warboss elimination must penetrate deep into Orc-held territory, often operating behind enemy lines for extended periods while tracking their target and identifying optimal assassination opportunities. The challenge lies not in killing the warboss, as even these massive brutes fall to concentrated bolter fire or well-placed plasma shots, but in extracting after the kill as every Orc in the vicinity converges on the battle brothers who killed their leader. Mechs represent secondary targets whose elimination undermines Orc technological capabilities and reduces the Greenskins' ability to field functional vehicles and heavy weapons. These technical specialists possess an intuitive understanding of machinery that allows them to construct weapons and vehicles from scrap metal and salvaged components, creating equipment that somehow functions despite violating every principle of proper engineering. The psychic gestalt field that all Orcs generate makes this ramshackle equipment work, but the mechs themselves serve as focal points for this effect, their presence ensuring that Orc technology maintains functionality. Kill teams targeting mech workshops destroy not only the technical specialist, but also the facilities where greenskin weapons and vehicles receive construction and maintenance, setting back Orc military capabilities in entire regions. Weirdboys present unique challenges as targets due to their unpredictable psychic abilities and the danger they pose even in death. These unfortunate Orcs serve as living conduits for the psychic energy generated by surrounding greenskins, channeling the WA field into devastating psychic attacks that can immolate entire squads or tear apart armored vehicles. The Weirdboys themselves suffer constant psychic pressure from the energy flowing through them, their heads literally exploding when the psychic buildup exceeds their capacity to channel it safely. Deathwatch librarians often accompany kill teams tasked with eliminating Weirdboys, as their psychic abilities allow them to disrupt the Orc Psyker's connection to the WA field or shield battle brothers from psychic attacks. The death of a Weirdboy frequently triggers a final psychic discharge as accumulated energy releases uncontrolled, making these eliminations dangerous even when executed perfectly. The tactical doctrine for anti-Orc operations emphasizes speed and overwhelming firepower concentrated at critical points in greenskin command structures. Unlike Tyrannid swarms that require systematic elimination of synapse creatures across entire battlefields, Orc forces can be disrupted through single well-executed strikes that kill key leaders and trigger cascading failures in greenskin coordination. Watch captains planning these operations analyze Orc social hierarchies through intelligence gathered by inquisitorial agents and reconnaissance kill teams, identifying which warbosses hold authority over the largest greenskin concentrations and which knobs would likely compete for leadership should the warboss die. The timing of decapitation strikes factors heavily into operational planning, as eliminating a warboss too early might allow another leader to consolidate power before Imperial forces can exploit the resulting chaos, while waiting too long risks allowing the WA to build unstoppable momentum. Necron Tomb Worlds present challenges of an entirely different nature, as these ancient Xenos possess technologies that operate on principles fundamentally different from anything else in the galaxy. The self-repairing warriors that emerge from stasis crypts beneath Tomb World surfaces regenerate damage through molecular reconstruction, their living metal bodies reforming even after sustaining catastrophic damage. A Necron warrior struck by bolter fire that would kill any organic creature simply collapses into its component molecules before reassembling moments later, completely restored and ready to continue fighting. This regenerative capability makes conventional infantry tactics ineffective against Necron forces, as kill teams cannot achieve permanent kills through simple application of firepower. The Deathwatch has developed specialized approaches to combating these ancient machines, focusing on catastrophic damage that prevents regeneration or targeting the support systems that enable resurrection protocols. Plasma weapons and melta-guns prove most effective against Necron warriors, as the extreme temperatures these weapons generate can cause sufficient molecular disruption to prevent living metal regeneration. A plasma bolt that strikes a Necron warrior's torso vaporizes enough material that the self-repair systems cannot gather sufficient mass for reconstruction. Melta-weapons fired at close range create thermal effects so intense that they reduce Necron bodies to metallic vapor, eliminating the physical structure necessary for resurrection. Battle Brothers engaging Necron forces prioritize these weapons in their loadouts, accepting reduced effectiveness against other target types in exchange for the killing power necessary to permanently eliminate these ancient machines. The phase-out technology that Necrons employ when suffering catastrophic casualties presents additional complications for Deathwatch operations. When Necron forces sustain sufficient damage, the surviving warriors teleport back to their tomb complexes for repair and reconstruction, denying kill teams the ability to confirm permanent elimination of enemy forces. This technology operates automatically, triggering when individual warriors suffer damage beyond their immediate repair capacity or when overall force strength falls below predetermined thresholds. Kill teams conducting operations against Necron forces must account for this capability in their tactical planning, understanding that enemies they damaged but failed to completely destroy will return to battle after undergoing repairs in their tomb complexes. Canoptech constructs serve as autonomous guardians and maintenance systems for Necron tomb worlds, machines programmed to defend their masters' resting places and maintain the stasis systems that preserve sleeping Necron dynasties. Canoptech wraiths phase in and out of normal space-time, their dimensional destabilization matrices allowing them to pass through solid matter and strike from unexpected angles. These constructs prove extremely difficult to target effectively, as their phase shifting makes them immune to many conventional weapons. Canoptech spiders coordinate swarms of smaller scarabs, beetle-like constructs that consume metal and convert it into raw materials for Necron reconstruction. A scarab swarm can strip a space marine's armor in minutes, their molecular disassemblers breaking down ceramite and plasteel into component atoms that the spiders collect for later use. The reality warping technologies employed by higher-tier Necron forces challenge fundamental Imperial understanding of physics and the nature of reality itself. Cryptechs wield devices that manipulate time, gravity, and dimensional barriers, creating effects that resemble psychic powers but operate through technological rather than warp-based mechanisms. A chronomancer can slow time around enemy forces, making their movements appear glacial, while Necron warriors maneuver at normal speed. Plasmancers unleash cascading energy discharges that arc between targets like lightning, while simultaneously existing in multiple locations. These technologies operate on principles that tech priests struggle to comprehend even after extensive study of recovered Necron artifacts, suggesting scientific knowledge that humanity lost during the dark age of technology or never possessed at all. Deathwatch operations against Necron tomb worlds typically focus on preventing awakening rather than engaging fully active dynasties, as the latter requires military resources far beyond what kill teams can provide. Intelligence-gathering missions identify tomb worlds before their inhabitants fully rouse from stasis, allowing Imperial forces to implement containment protocols or conduct exterminatus operations before the Necrons achieve full operational capability. Kill teams deployed to suspected tomb worlds search for evidence of Necron presence, monitoring for the energy signatures that accompany tomb awakening and investigating archaeological sites that might conceal entrance points to underground complexes. These reconnaissance operations require extreme caution, as disturbing Necron security systems can trigger defensive responses that activate warrior cohorts or summon Canoptech constructs to eliminate intruders. Beyond the major Xenos threats that dominate Imperial strategic planning, the Deathwatch maintains expertise on dozens of lesser-known alien species whose individual threat levels might seem minor, but whose cumulative impact on Imperial security remains significant. The Atrud represent one such threat, a species of time-manipulating Xenos whose infestations cause accelerated entropic decay in everything around them. Imperial forces encountering Atrud warrens watch their equipment age decades in hours, their weapons rusting and ammunition degrading while the aliens themselves remain untouched by conventional attacks. The Atrud's ability to manipulate localized time fields makes them nearly impossible to target with projectile weapons, as bullets and bolts slow to harmless velocities when entering the temporal distortions surrounding these creatures. Deathwatch operations against H-Rud infestations employ specialized equipment, including stasis fields, that counter the aliens' temporal manipulation and flamers, whose continuous energy discharge proves less susceptible to time distortion effects than projectile weapons. The Rangdan represent a threat so severe that the Imperium maintains absolute classification on all information regarding these Xenos, with knowledge of the species restricted to the highest levels of inquisitorial authority and senior Deathwatch leadership. The Rangdan Xenocides of the Great Crusade era required the deployment of multiple Space Marine legions and resulted in casualties so catastrophic that entire legions never recovered their pre-war strength. The exact nature of the Rangdan threat remains buried in sealed archives, accessible only to those with clearance levels granted by the High Lords of Terra themselves. Deathwatch records reference Rangdan remnants encountered in isolated regions of space, suggesting that complete eradication of this species was never achieved despite the massive military effort dedicated to that purpose. Kill teams deployed against suspected Rangdan presence operate under protocols that emphasize information gathering and immediate extraction rather than direct engagement, as current doctrine assumes that eliminating Rangdan forces requires resources beyond what small unit actions can provide. The Quorl Swarmhood presents a different category of threat, an insected species whose highly organized society and aggressive expansion threatens Imperial worlds along the Segmentum Pacificus borders. Quorl forces operate with coordination that rivals the Tyranid hive mind, but stems from sophisticated pheromonal communication and rigid social hierarchies rather than psychic linkage. Their warrior castes demonstrate tactical flexibility and technological sophistication that make them far more dangerous than their insected appearance might suggest, employing advanced weapons and coordinated assault tactics that have overwhelmed Imperial Guard regiments on multiple occasions. Deathwatch operations against Quorl incursions focus on eliminating the queen organisms that coordinate Swarmhood activities, as these individuals serve as both military commanders and reproductive centers for their species. The death of a queen disrupts Quorl coordination and halts reproduction of new warriors, buying Imperial forces time to eliminate remaining Swarmhood elements before new queens can mature. The Umbra represent perhaps the most enigmatic Xenos species. The Deathwatch has cataloged shadow-dwelling creatures whose very nature challenges Imperial understanding of what constitutes a living organism. These entities exist partially outside normal space-time, manifesting as areas of absolute darkness that consume light and heat, while somehow maintaining coherent form and apparent intelligence. Imperial encounters with Umbra remain rare and poorly documented, as these creatures inhabit regions of space so remote that few Imperial expeditions penetrate their territories. The limited information available suggests the Umbra possess abilities to manipulate darkness itself as a weapon, creating zones of absolute shadow that drive humans insane through sensory deprivation, while the creatures attack from within the darkness. Deathwatch protocols for Umbra encounters emphasize maintaining constant illumination and immediate extraction if darkness manifestations occur, as current tactical doctrine provides no reliable methods for combating entities that exist primarily as living shadow. The breadth of Xenos threats cataloged in Deathwatch archives demonstrates the staggering diversity of alien life that threatens humanity's dominion across the galaxy. Each species presents unique challenges requiring specialized tactics and equipment, from the regenerating Necron warriors to the time manipulating H-Rud to the shadow-dwelling Umbra. Watch fortresses maintain extensive xenobiology libraries documenting thousands of alien species, many known only from single encounters or fragmentary reports from exploration fleets operating beyond Imperial borders. Battle Brothers serving in the Deathwatch spend significant portions of their deployment studying these archives, absorbing information about Xenos' capabilities and vulnerabilities that might prove crucial during future operations. The organization's institutional knowledge regarding alien threats represents one of its most valuable assets, a repository of hard-won experience purchased with the lives of battle brothers across millennia of warfare against every imaginable form of Xenos life. The Achilles Crusade into the Jericho Reach stands as one of the most ambitious Imperial military operations of the 41st millennium, a massive undertaking that saw millions of Imperial Guardsmen, dozens of Space Marine chapters, and entire battle fleets committed to reclaiming a region of space that had fallen beyond Imperial control during the Age of Shadow. The Jericho Reach occupies a strategic position along the eastern fringe, its systems containing valuable resources and ancient human colonies whose populations had endured millennia of isolation from the greater Imperium. Lord Militant Achilles received command of the Crusade in the year 777 of the 41st millennium, tasked with reconquering the Reach and bringing its lost worlds back into the Imperial fold. The Deathwatch's role in this massive undertaking differed fundamentally from the Guard regiments and Space Marine battle companies that formed the Crusade's main combat strength. As Watch Fortress Iriok coordinated intelligence, gathering operations and surgical strikes against Xenos threats that conventional Imperial forces lacked the specialized capabilities to counter effectively. The Jericho Reach presented a target environment unlike the relatively straightforward reconquest operations that characterize many Imperial crusades. Rather than facing a single unified enemy force, Crusade elements encountered multiple distinct Xenos threats operating independently across different regions of the Reach. Orc warbands controlled several systems in the Orpheus salient, their ramshackle fleets launching raids against Imperial supply convoys and newly reclaimed worlds. Tau forces had established a presence in the Canis salient, their expansion fleets probing Imperial defenses and offering their insidious greater good philosophy to human populations weary of Imperial rule. Tyrannid splinter fleets infiltrated worlds throughout the Reach, their genestealer cults preparing planets for consumption by establishing psychic beacons that would guide larger hive fleet elements toward vulnerable targets. The presence of these diverse threats required the Crusade to maintain operational flexibility and dedicate significant resources to intelligence gathering, tasks for which the Deathwatch proved uniquely suited. Watch Commander Mordigale of Iriok established a network of kill teams that penetrated deep into contested regions of the Reach, often operating months ahead of conventional Imperial forces to assess Xenos' strength and identify critical targets whose elimination would facilitate the Crusade's advance. These reconnaissance operations provided Lord Militant Achilles with intelligence that shaped the Crusade's strategic planning, revealing which systems harbored significant Xenos populations and which could be bypassed in favor of more strategically valuable objectives. A kill team operating in the Orpheus salient spent 3 months tracking an Orc warboss whose growing threatened to overwhelm Imperial forces advancing through that region, eventually locating the Greenskin leader's base of operations and calling in a full battle company strike that eliminated the warboss and scattered his followers before the could achieve critical mass. The intelligence gathered by Deathwatch kill teams frequently revealed threats that conventional reconnaissance assets had missed entirely. Genestealer cult infiltration throughout the Reach proved far more extensive than initial Crusade intelligence assessments had indicated, with infected populations present on worlds that Imperial authorities believed secure. A Proteus kill team investigating unusual disappearances on the hive world of Karlak discovered an entire underhive district controlled by a genestealer patriarch, its cult numbering in the thousands, and positioned to sabotage the planet's industrial output at the moment when Crusade forces most needed its manufactorum production. The kill team's elimination of the Patriarch and subsequent purging operations by local Arbites forces prevented what could have been catastrophic disruptions to Crusade logistics, though the operation required extensive civilian casualties, as infected populations proved impossible to distinguish from uncontaminated citizens without invasive genetic screening. Tau expansion into the Cannies salient created complications that extended beyond simple military confrontation, as the Xenos employed sophisticated propaganda and diplomatic outreach that threatened to undermine imperial authority on worlds where populations had endured centuries of isolation and neglect. The Tau offered advanced technology, efficient governance, and inclusion in their greater good philosophy, promises that resonated with planetary governors struggling to meet imperial tithe requirements and populations weary of the Imperium's harsh demands. Deathwatch operations in the Cannies salient focused on disrupting Tau diplomatic efforts and eliminating the water caste negotiators, whose silver tongues proved as dangerous as fire-cast pulse rifles. Kill teams infiltrated worlds where Tau delegations had established contact with local authorities, assassinating Xenos diplomats and destroying the advanced technology samples they used to demonstrate the supposed superiority of Tau civilization. The Deathwatch's anti-Tau operations in the Jericho Reach demonstrated the organization's willingness to employ methods that conventional Space Marine chapters might consider beneath their dignity. Rather than engaging Tau forces in open battle, where the Xenos superior ranged firepower and coordinated battlesuit tactics provided significant advantages, Kill teams struck from ambush and withdrew before Tau forces could organize effective responses. Venator teams eliminated Tau commanders with precision fire from concealed positions, their stalker pattern bolt guns allowing them to engage targets at ranges where Tau pulse rifles could not effectively return fire. Other kill teams sabotaged Tau's supply depots and communication relays, degrading the Xenos' logistical infrastructure and forcing them to divert resources toward protecting their rear areas rather than prosecuting offensive operations against Imperial forces. The targeting of ethereal caste leaders represented the most controversial aspect of Deathwatch anti-Tau operations in the Reach, as these assassinations required kill teams to penetrate deep into Tau-controlled territory and eliminate targets whose deaths would trigger significant political consequences. The Ethereals serve as the spiritual and philosophical leaders of Tau society, their presence inspiring devotion among fire caste warriors and their guidance shaping Tau's strategic decisions. Imperial xenologists remain uncertain whether Ethereals employ pheromonal manipulation, psychic influence, or simple charismatic leadership to maintain their authority, but the practical effect remains consistent across all observed Tau forces. The death of an Ethereal creates profound disruption in nearby Tau units, with fire caste warriors often abandoning tactical discipline in their grief and rage. A Venator kill team successfully eliminated an Ethereal coordinating Tau expansion efforts in the Grey Hell front, the Xenos leader's death triggering a Tau withdrawal from 3 contested systems, as surviving forces fell back to regroup and select new leadership. The defense of Watch Fortress Iriok against Hive Fleet Dagon in 815 tested the installation's defensive capabilities and the resolve of its garrison in ways that few other engagements have matched. The appearance of Dagon's vanguard organisms in the Jericho Reach occurred without warning, the Hive fleet emerging from the intergalactic void and immediately beginning consumption of outlying Imperial worlds. The speed of the Tyrannid advance caught Crusade forces unprepared, as conventional intelligence assets had provided no indication that a Hive fleet approached the region. Watch Commander Mordigale recognized that Iriok's position along major warp routes made the fortress a strategic target whose capture would grant the Tyrannids access to the fortress's extensive xenobiology archives and potentially compromise Deathwatch operations throughout the entire sector. Rather than evacuating the installation, Mordigale ordered the garrison to prepare for siege, recalling all available kill teams and requesting reinforcements from nearby watch stations. The Tyrannid assault on Iriok began with the arrival of a massive bioship designated Gorgon's Maw, a vessel whose size exceeded that of Imperial battleships and whose weapons batteries could project corrosive bioplasma across void distances. The bioship disgorged thousands of mycetic spores containing Tyrannid warrior organisms, the spores burning through Iriok's void shields and impacting against the station's armored hull. Gargoyle swarms followed the initial spore deployment, their bioweapons raking the fortress's external gun emplacements, while larger organisms, including carnifexes and hive tyrants, teleported directly onto the station's outer sections. The garrison's defensive batteries engaged the incoming swarm with overlapping fields of fire, macro cannons and lance arrays destroying hundreds of organisms before they could reach the station's hull, but the sheer weight of numbers ensured that significant Tyranid forces established footholds on Eriok's exterior. The battle for Eriok's outer sections lasted 3 days of continuous combat, as Deathwatch kill teams fought to contain Tyranid penetrations and prevent the swarm from breaching the fortress's inner sanctums. Battle Brothers equipped with flamers and heavy bolters loaded with Hellfire rounds established defensive positions at critical choke points, their weapons creating fields of fire that turned approach corridors into killing zones filled with burning Tyranid corpses. The aliens adapted to these defensive arrangements with horrifying speed. Subsequent waves, including lictors that infiltrated through ventilation systems and genestealers that cut through bulkheads to bypass fortified positions. Watch Captain Artemis personally led a strike force that eliminated a hive tyrant coordinating the assault on the fortress's northern quadrant, the synapse creature's death creating temporary confusion among nearby organisms that allowed Deathwatch forces to collapse the Tyranid salient and seal the breaches through which the aliens had penetrated. The xenobiology sections of Eriok became focal points of desperate fighting as Tyranid organisms demonstrated awareness of the valuable specimens and research materials housed in those areas. Whether the hive mind possessed specific knowledge of Eriok's contents or simply recognized the biological signatures of captured Tyranid organisms remained unclear, but the aliens pressed their attacks against the xenobiology wings with particular intensity. Apothecaries and tech marines fought alongside Battle Brothers to defend the containment cells, recognizing that a breach in those sections could release specimens whose capabilities made them dangerous even to space marines. The garrison implemented emergency protocols that flooded compromised sections with toxins designed to kill organic tissue, sacrificing months of research and irreplaceable specimens to prevent them from falling into Tyranid control or escaping containment during the chaos of battle. The arrival of reinforcements from Watch Station Midil and elements of the Ultramarines' Second Company turned the battle's momentum decisively against the Tyranid assault. The relief force translated from the warp directly into engagement range of the Gorgon's Maw, their strike cruisers launching boarding torpedoes that penetrated the bioship's hull and deployed Battle Brothers into its vital organ chambers. The boarding action achieved its objectives with brutal efficiency, Deathwatch veterans and Ultramarine Terminators fighting through swarms of defensive organisms to reach and destroy the capillary towers that distributed nutrients throughout the bioship's massive bulk. The Gorgon's Maw began dying as its internal systems failed, the bioship's weapons falling silent, and its spawning chambers ceasing production of new organisms. The death of the bioship severed the psychic coordination linking the Tyranid forces assaulting Eriok to the greater hive mind, individual organisms reverting to instinctive behaviors that made them vulnerable to systematic elimination by the fortress's garrison. The defense of Eriok cost the Deathwatch 43 Battle Brothers killed in action, with dozens more suffering injuries that required extensive augmetic reconstruction. The fortress itself sustained damage that required months of repair work, entire sections left exposed to void after Tyranid bioacids ate through armored bulkheads and structural supports. The xenobiology wings lost approximately 60% of their specimen collection to either Tyranid consumption or emergency purge protocols, setting back research programs that had consumed decades of effort. Despite these losses, the successful defense preserved Eriok as a functional watch fortress and demonstrated that properly fortified Deathwatch installations could withstand even sustained Tyranid assault when defended by determined garrisons, employing the specialized anti-Xenos tactics the organization had developed. The Corinthian crusade of the early 42nd millennium saw the Deathwatch prosecuting extensive operations against Tau expansion into the Damocles Gulf region, a campaign that emphasized intelligence gathering and precision strikes over the conventional warfare that characterized the Imperial Guard and Space Marine forces engaging Tau armies directly. The Tau had exploited the confusion following the opening of the Great Rift to expand their sphere of influence into systems that Imperial authorities considered strategically vital, their water-caste diplomats offering protection and prosperity to human populations struggling with the disruptions caused by the Cicatrix Maleficarium's appearance. The Corinthian Crusade aimed to halt this expansion and reclaim worlds that had accepted Tau governance, but conventional military operations proved insufficient against an enemy whose superior technology and coordinated tactics allowed them to inflict disproportionate casualties on Imperial forces. Deathwatch kill teams operating ahead of Crusade battle lines conducted reconnaissance that revealed the extent of Tau infiltration throughout contested regions. Water-caste agents had established networks of human collaborators on worlds that remained nominally under Imperial control, these traitors providing intelligence on Imperial military deployments and sabotaging defensive preparations. The Deathwatch coordinated with Ordo Xenos Inquisitors to identify and eliminate these collaboration networks, kill teams conducting raids that captured water-caste agents, and extracted intelligence about Tau's strategic objectives. The information gathered through these operations allowed Crusade commanders to anticipate Tau movements and position Imperial forces to counter Xenos' offensives before they achieved their objectives. The systematic targeting of ethereal caste leaders became a central component of Deathwatch strategy during the Corinthian Crusade, as Imperial commanders recognized that eliminating these Xenos' spiritual leaders created disruption far exceeding the simple loss of individual commanders. A kill team led by Watch Captain Davian successfully infiltrated a Tau diplomatic compound on the world of Porphyry, eliminating an ethereal who had convinced the planetary governor to accept Tau's suzerainty in exchange for advanced technology and protection from chaos incursions. The ethereal's death and the subsequent exposure of the governor's collaboration triggered an Imperial crackdown that saw thousands of suspected collaborators executed and Tau sympathizers purged from positions of authority throughout the subsector. The brutality of the Imperial response served as warning to other worlds considering accepting Tau offers, demonstrating that the Imperium would tolerate no compromise with Xenos' influence regardless of the benefits such arrangements might provide. The Shadow War against Genestealer cult infiltration represents an ongoing campaign that spans the entire Imperium, a conflict fought largely in darkness as Deathwatch kill teams and Ordo Xenos Inquisitors work to identify and purge Xenos' corruption before it can prepare worlds for Tyrannid consumption. Unlike conventional military campaigns with clear frontlines and identifiable enemy forces, the Shadow War unfolds in hive city underhives, on isolated agri-worlds, and within the crews of merchant vessels traveling between star systems. Genestealer patriarchs establish cult cells that grow across generations, infected humans passing their genetic corruption to their children while maintaining facades of loyal Imperial citizenship. By the time cult presence becomes obvious enough for planetary authorities to recognize the threat, the infection typically numbers in the thousands or tens of thousands, with cult members occupying positions throughout planetary infrastructure and defense forces. The Deathwatch's role in the Shadow War emphasizes early detection and rapid elimination of cult cells before they achieve sufficient size and influence to resist purging operations. Kill teams deploy to worlds showing statistical anomalies that might indicate Genestealer presence, investigating unusual birth rates, unexplained disappearances, or patterns of industrial sabotage that suggest coordinated action by hidden organizations. These investigations require Battle Brothers to operate with subtlety uncommon in Space Marine operations, gathering evidence and identifying cult leadership without triggering premature uprisings that would force infected populations into open rebellion. A kill team operating on the hive world of Vitrion Primaris spent months tracking cult activity through the planets under Hive, gradually mapping the organization's structure and identifying the Patriarch's location before conducting a surgical strike that eliminated the cult's leadership and allowed local Arbites forces to round up the remaining infected population. The coordination between the Deathwatch and the Ordo Xenos during Shadow War operations demonstrates the close working relationship between the organization and its inquisitorial masters. Inquisitors specializing in genestealer cult investigation provide kill teams with intelligence gathered through their networks of informants and acolytes, while Battle Brothers conducting field operations report their findings back to Inquisitors who analyze the data for patterns that might reveal larger cult networks spanning multiple worlds. This information sharing allows both organizations to operate more effectively than either could manage independently, with inquisitorial investigation providing context and strategic understanding, while Deathwatch combat capabilities enable elimination of threats that normal Imperial forces cannot reliably counter. An Inquisitor investigating cult activity in the Calixis sector identified a pattern suggesting that infected merchant crews were spreading genestealer genetic material across dozens of worlds, their trade routes creating a network of nascent cult cells throughout the sector. Deathwatch kill teams deployed to intercept these vessels, boarding them in deep space and purging their crews before the ships could reach their destinations and spread infection to additional populations. The psychological toll of Shadow War operations affects even veteran Battle Brothers, as the nature of genestealer cult combat differs fundamentally from conventional warfare against Xenos species. Kill teams fighting orcs or Tyranids face enemies whose alien nature remains obvious, creatures whose inhuman appearance and behavior mark them clearly as threats deserving extermination. Genestealer cult members, particularly those in early generations of infection, appear almost entirely human despite their genetic corruption. They live as Imperial citizens, work in Imperial factories, serve in planetary defense forces, and raise families in ways that superficially resemble normal human existence. The necessity of killing these infected populations, including children born with genetic corruption they neither chose nor understand, creates moral complications that some Battle Brothers struggle to reconcile with their duty. Chaplains assigned to kill teams conducting Shadow War operations provide spiritual counseling that emphasizes the existential threat that genestealer cults represent, reminding Battle Brothers that mercy toward the infected serves only to enable the Tyranid consumption of entire worlds. The scope of genestealer infiltration throughout the Imperium remains impossible to accurately assess, as successful cult cells maintain perfect operational security until they achieve sufficient strength to begin preparing their worlds for Tyranid arrival. Ordo Xenos estimates suggest that thousands of worlds harbor undetected cult cells, their infected populations growing across generations, while planetary authorities remain completely unaware of the corruption spreading through their populations. The Deathwatch prosecutes the Shadow War with the understanding that complete victory remains impossible, that new cult cells establish themselves constantly as genestealer organisms infiltrate human populations through merchant shipping, military deployments, and the countless other mechanisms by which humans travel between star systems. The organization's objective focuses not on eliminating genestealer cults entirely, but on maintaining suppression efforts that prevent cults from achieving the critical mass necessary to successfully summon Tyranid hive fleets, buying the Imperium time to address the countless other threats that assail humanity from all sides. The operational methodology of Deathwatch kill teams fundamentally distinguishes them from standard Space Marine combat formations, emphasizing rapid insertion into hostile territory, execution of specific objectives, and immediate extraction before enemy forces can mount effective responses. While Codex-compliant chapters deploy companies or battle groups that establish forward operating bases and prosecute sustained campaigns across entire war zones, the Deathwatch operates on principles of surgical precision. A kill team materializes in enemy territory, eliminates its designated target, and vanishes before the Xenos forces comprehend what occurred. This approach requires specialized insertion and extraction capabilities that standard chapter assets cannot reliably provide, necessitating close coordination with Imperial Navy elements and the maintenance of dedicated transport craft optimized for covert operations. The Corvus Blackstar represents the most distinctive aircraft in the Deathwatch arsenal, a dedicated assault transport designed specifically for inserting kill teams into contested airspace and extracting them under fire. The craft's design incorporates stealth technologies that reduce its sensor signature to levels approaching those of dedicated reconnaissance aircraft, allowing it to penetrate enemy air defense networks that would destroy conventional dropships. The Blackstar's airframe employs angled surfaces that deflect scanner beams and engine baffles that suppress thermal emissions, making the craft extremely difficult to detect even when operating at low altitude in hostile territory. A Blackstar approaching a Tau fire base might pass within kilometers of sensor arrays without triggering alarms, its stealth characteristics allowing it to deposit a kill team directly adjacent to priority targets before enemy forces recognize the intrusion. The armament configuration of the Corvus Blackstar reflects its dual role as insertion craft and fire support platform. Twin assault cannons mounted in nose turrets provide devastating anti-infantry firepower, their high rate of fire capable of suppressing enemy positions during insertion and extraction phases. Blackstar rocket launchers deliver heavier ordnance against armored targets or fortified positions, with each launcher carrying multiple warheads that can be fired individually or in devastating salvos. Some Blackstars mount hurricane bolters in place of assault cannons, trading rate of fire for the superior penetration and explosive power of mass reactive rounds. The flexibility of these armament options allows pilots to configure their aircraft according to mission parameters, emphasizing anti-armor capability when operating against mechanized Xenos forces, or maximizing anti-infantry firepower when supporting operations against swarm organisms. The interior compartment of a Blackstar accommodates a full kill team plus equipment, with magnetic locks securing battle brothers during high-speed maneuvering and rapid combat insertions. The craft's assault ramp deploys in seconds, allowing kill teams to disembark directly into combat without the vulnerable pause that conventional dropship operations require. Blackstar pilots train extensively in combat insertion techniques that minimize their aircraft's exposure to enemy fire, approaching landing zones at maximum speed before executing sudden deceleration that allows the kill team to deploy while the craft maintains forward momentum. The entire insertion sequence from final approach to team deployment and aircraft departure typically lasts less than 30 seconds, a window so brief that many Xenos forces fail to respond effectively before the Blackstar vanishes back into the operational environment. Thunderhawk gunships provide an alternative insertion platform when operations require heavier firepower or the transport of equipment loads exceeding Blackstar capacity. These venerable craft lack the Blackstar's sophisticated stealth characteristics, but compensate with superior armor protection and devastating weapons arrays. A Thunderhawk conducting a combat insertion can suppress enemy positions with its dorsal-mounted battle cannon, while its heavy bolters rake defensive positions, creating conditions that allow kill teams to deploy into contested landing zones that would prove untenable for lighter aircraft. The craft's cargo capacity permits the transport of bikes, specialized equipment packages, or additional ammunition loads that extend kill team operational endurance beyond what battle brothers can carry in their armor's storage compartments. The coordination between Deathwatch pilots and kill team leaders requires precise communication and mutual trust developed through extensive joint training. Pilots must understand the tactical objectives their passengers pursue and the timing requirements that govern successful operations. A kill team conducting an assassination mission against a Tau ethereal might require their Black Star to loiter in a concealed position several kilometers from the target location, ready to execute emergency extraction if the operation compromises prematurely. The pilot maintains constant communication with the kill team leader, monitoring tactical developments and adjusting extraction plans according to evolving battlefield conditions. When the team completes its mission and calls for extraction, the pilot must navigate to the designated pickup point through whatever enemy resistance has developed, often flying through hostile airspace while Xenos forces attempt to intercept the departing craft. Teleportarium strikes represent the most aggressive insertion methodology available to Deathwatch forces, materializing kill teams directly at their objective points without requiring aircraft to penetrate enemy airspace. This capability depends on specialized teleportarium chambers maintained aboard watch fortresses and certain Navy vessels, facilities that generate the massive energy requirements necessary for translating space marines across the dimensional barriers separating real space from the warp. The technology operates on principles that even tech priests struggle to fully comprehend, involving brief transitions through warp space that carry significant risks of materialization errors or exposure to entities that inhabit that nightmarish realm. Despite these dangers, teleportarium strikes provide unmatched tactical surprise and eliminate the vulnerability windows associated with aircraft-based insertions. The preparation for teleportarium deployment requires extensive calculations by tech priests who must account for gravitational fields, electromagnetic interference, and the structural composition of target areas. Materializing battle brothers inside solid matter results in catastrophic death as their bodies attempt to occupy the same physical space as walls, floors, or equipment. The targeting systems that guide teleportarium strikes incorporate sophisticated auspex scans and data feeds from reconnaissance assets, building three-dimensional maps of target areas that identify safe materialization points. Even with these precautions, teleportarium operations carry inherent risks that conventional insertions avoid. A kill team might materialize several meters from their intended arrival point due to unexpected interference, or individual battle brothers might scatter across a wider area than planned if the teleportarium field destabilizes during transit. The disorientation that accompanies teleportarium transit affects even veteran battle brothers, as the brief passage through warp space creates sensory distortions and temporal discontinuities that require several seconds to overcome. Kill teams materializing via teleportarium must immediately establish defensive positions and orient themselves to their surroundings, while their enhanced physiology compensates for the neurological disruption of warp transit. Enemy forces in the immediate area often fail to respond effectively during these crucial first moments, their surprise at the sudden appearance of armored warriors buying the kill team time to recover full combat effectiveness. A team teleporting into a Necron tomb complex might use this window to identify priority targets and establish fields of fire before the ancient machines recognize the intrusion and activate defensive protocols. The extraction of kill teams via teleportarium presents additional complications compared to insertion operations, as the team must survive long enough at their objective point for tech priests to re-establish teleportarium locks and execute retrieval sequences. The process requires several minutes during which battle brothers must hold their position against whatever enemy response develops, often while carrying wounded team members or captured intelligence materials. The vulnerability of this extraction window makes teleportarium operations unsuitable for missions where enemy reinforcements can arrive quickly or where the objective location provides inadequate defensive positions. Watch captains planning teleportarium strikes carefully assess whether kill teams can reasonably expect to hold extraction points long enough for successful retrieval, sometimes determining that alternative extraction methods using aircraft or ground vehicles provide better odds of mission success. Coordination with Imperial Navy assets extends Deathwatch operational reach far beyond what the organization's own transport capabilities could achieve, allowing kill teams to deploy across entire sectors and respond to Xenos threats in systems where watch fortresses maintain no permanent presence. Navy vessels provide transportation for kill teams traveling between star systems, their warp-capable drives enabling rapid redeployment that would prove impossible using only the Deathwatch's limited fleet assets. A kill team operating from Watch Fortress Iriok might receive orders to deploy to a System 3 subsectors distant, requiring Navy transport to reach the operational theater within tactically relevant timeframes. The Navy captains commanding these vessels understand that Deathwatch operations frequently involve classified intelligence and sensitive missions that require operational security beyond normal military protocols. The relationship between Navy ship captains and Deathwatch commanders operates on principles of mutual professional respect rather than rigid command hierarchies. Navy vessels remain under their captain's authority even when transporting Deathwatch forces, with ship commanders retaining final say over navigation decisions and threat responses. However, most Navy officers recognize the strategic importance of Deathwatch operations and accommodate kill team requirements whenever possible without compromising their vessel's safety. A frigate captain transporting a kill team to a contested system might agree to approach closer to enemy-held worlds than normal Navy doctrine permits, understanding that the kill team's mission objectives justify accepting increased risk of Xenos interdiction. The captain maintains authority to refuse requests that would place the ship in untenable danger, but experienced Deathwatch commanders frame their requirements in terms that acknowledge Navy concerns while emphasizing operational necessities. The decapitation strike doctrine that defines much Deathwatch operational planning focuses on identifying and eliminating Xenos leadership elements, whose deaths will create disproportionate disruption to enemy forces. This approach recognizes that most Xenos species, despite their alien nature, depend on command structures and coordination mechanisms that become vulnerable when key individuals or nodes suffer elimination. An Orkwa collapses into infighting when its warboss dies. A Tau military operation loses cohesion when its commander falls and fire caste warriors must operate without central coordination. A Tyrannid swarm reverts to instinctive behavior when synapse creatures sustaining hive mind connections suffer destruction. The systematic targeting of these critical nodes allows small Deathwatch forces to achieve strategic effects far exceeding what their limited numbers would suggest possible through conventional combat operations. The intelligence gathering that enables effective decapitation strikes requires extensive reconnaissance and analysis of enemy command structures. Kill teams conducting preliminary operations in Xenos-held territory identify leadership elements through observation of enemy behavior patterns, communications intercepts, and analysis of tactical responses to Imperial probing attacks. An Ork warboss reveals himself through the deference shown by surrounding knobs and the concentration of the best equipment and largest mobs around his position. A Tau commander's location becomes apparent through the coordination of nearby fire cast units and the presence of drone controllers and battlesuit escorts. A Tyrannid hive tyrant announces itself through the improved tactical performance of organisms operating within range of its synaptic influence. Watch captains analyzing this intelligence assess which targets present the most valuable objectives and which kill team configurations possess the best probability of successfully eliminating priority enemies. The execution phase of decapitation strikes demands precise timing and flawless coordination between kill team members, as these operations typically occur deep in enemy territory where any delay or complication could prove fatal. A Venator team tasked with eliminating a Tau ethereal might spend days infiltrating through enemy patrol zones, moving only during periods when Tau surveillance systems experience gaps in coverage or when weather conditions degrade sensor effectiveness. The team establishes firing positions that provide clear sight lines to the target while offering concealment from enemy observation and routes for rapid withdrawal after the kill. When the ethereal finally presents a viable target, the team's designated marksman must achieve a first-shot kill, as any miss or wound that fails to immediately eliminate the target will trigger security responses that make extraction exponentially more difficult. The strategic impact of successful decapitation strikes often manifests across entire operational theaters rather than merely affecting local tactical situations. The death of a senior Tau commander might force the Xenos to suspend offensive operations across multiple systems, while replacement leadership travels from Tau space and familiarizes itself with local conditions. The elimination of an Orc warboss leading a multi-system WA can fragment the greenskin threat into dozens of smaller warbands that Imperial forces can defeat piecemeal rather than facing a unified enemy capable of overwhelming individual Imperial worlds. The destruction of Tyrannid synapse creatures in sufficient numbers can cause entire swarm elements to lose cohesion and scatter, buying Imperial defenders time to establish fortified positions or evacuate civilian populations before the hive mind reestablishes control over its organisms. The targeting of Xenos infrastructure represents an alternative application of Deathwatch strike doctrine, focusing on facilities and systems whose destruction undermines enemy operational capabilities without requiring direct engagement of leadership elements. Tau supply depots stockpile the advanced equipment and ammunition that Firecast forces require to maintain their technological advantages over Imperial troops. Orc-mech workshops produce the ramshackle vehicles and heavy weapons that give greenskin mobs their offensive punch. Tyrannid capillary towers distribute nutrients throughout bioships and enable the spawning of new organisms. The destruction of these infrastructure targets degrades enemy capabilities in ways that persist long after the kill teams responsible withdraw from operational areas, creating strategic effects through systematic degradation of enemy logistics and production capacity. Intelligence gathering operations conducted by Deathwatch kill teams generate information that feeds into broader inquisitorial knowledge bases and Imperial strategic planning processes. The organization's battle brothers operate in environments and against enemies that few other Imperial forces encounter, accumulating expertise about Xenos' capabilities, behaviors, and technologies that would otherwise remain unknown to Imperial authorities. A kill team conducting reconnaissance of a Necron tomb world documents the types of warrior constructs emerging from stasis and the weapon systems they employ, information that allows Ordo Xenos xenologists to update threat assessments and develop countermeasures. Another team investigating Tau expansion into a contested sector identifies the diplomatic strategies water caste agents employ and the technological incentives they offer to human populations, intelligence that helps Imperial propagandists craft counter-narratives that undermine Xenos' influence. The integration of Deathwatch findings into inquisitorial databases occurs through formal reporting channels that connect watch fortresses to Ordo Xenos facilities throughout the Imperium. Kill team leaders submit detailed after-action reports documenting their observations, enemy capabilities encountered, and tactical lessons learned during operations. These reports undergo analysis by inquisitorial savants who extract actionable intelligence and identify patterns that might indicate larger strategic developments. An inquisitor reviewing reports from multiple kill teams operating in the same sector might recognize that seemingly unrelated Tau probing attacks actually represent coordinated reconnaissance preceding a major offensive, allowing Imperial forces to prepare defenses before the Xenos launch their assault. The systematic collection and analysis of Deathwatch operational intelligence creates an institutional knowledge base that informs Imperial responses to Xenos threats across the entire galaxy. The dissemination of intelligence gathered by the Deathwatch extends beyond the Ordo Xenos to include other Imperial military organizations whose operations benefit from improved understanding of Xenos' capabilities. Imperial Guard commanders facing Orc invasions receive tactical assessments detailing greenskin force compositions and recommended countermeasures developed through Deathwatch combat experience. Space Marine chapters preparing to engage Tyrannid Hive fleets access databases, documenting bioform capabilities, and effective weapons loadouts compiled from decades of Deathwatch anti-Tyranid operations. Imperial Navy admirals planning fleet actions against Tau expansion receive intelligence about Xenos ship capabilities and tactical doctrines observed during Deathwatch boarding actions and reconnaissance missions. This information sharing multiplies the strategic value of Deathwatch operations, as intelligence gathered by small kill teams influences military planning across entire crusades and campaigns. The tactical flexibility that defines Deathwatch combat operations stems directly from the diverse chapter backgrounds and specialized training that kill team members bring to their service. A team composed of battle brothers from 5 different chapters possesses 5 distinct sets of combat doctrines, tactical preferences, and specialized capabilities that can be employed according to mission requirements. The Ultramarines' adherence to Codex principles provides a framework for coordinated maneuver and fire discipline. The Space Wolf's preference for aggressive close combat offers options for overwhelming enemy positions through shock assault. The Salamander's expertise with flame weapons creates capabilities for clearing confined spaces or eliminating swarm organisms. The Imperial Fist's defensive proficiency enables the team to establish strongpoints and hold critical positions against counterattacks. The Raven Guard's stealth training allows infiltration approaches that bypass enemy security measures. The kill team leader's responsibility includes recognizing which team members' capabilities best suit specific tactical challenges and coordinating their employment to maximize effectiveness. A veteran sergeant from the Crimson Fists leading a mixed chapter team assaulting a Tau fire base might position his Salamander battle brother to suppress fire-cast defenders with heavy flamer fire, while directing his Raven Guard team member to infiltrate around the enemy flank and eliminate the Tau commander coordinating the defense. The Ultramarine provides covering fire from a position offering clear sight lines across the objective area, while the Space Wolf prepares to exploit any breakthrough with a close-quarters assault that prevents enemy forces from reorganizing their defensive line. This synthesis of different combat approaches creates tactical options unavailable to standard chapter squads, whose members all trained in identical doctrines. The adaptation required when battle brothers from different chapters must coordinate their actions extends beyond simple tactical cooperation to include accommodating fundamentally different approaches to warfare and command. A Dark Angel accustomed to his chapter's secretive nature and compartmentalized operational planning must learn to share information freely with team members from chapters whose cultures emphasize transparency and collective decision-making. A Black Templar whose chapter rejects the Codex Astartes must accept that his Ultramarine team members view Guilliman's writings as foundational texts deserving careful adherence. A Space Wolf must moderate his chapter's boisterous traditions when operating alongside battle brothers from more austere chapters who view excessive celebration or informal behavior as inconsistent with proper military discipline. The successful integration of these diverse approaches requires psychological flexibility and willingness to prioritize mission success over chapter pride. The specialized training that battle brothers receive upon joining the Deathwatch supplements their chapter-specific capabilities with knowledge and skills specifically relevant to Xenos extermination. Veterans arriving at Watch fortresses undergo intensive instruction in xenobiology, learning to recognize the physiological characteristics of major alien species and the tactical implications of their biological adaptations. A battle brother studying Tyranid organisms learns to distinguish between different bioform types by their silhouettes and movement patterns, allowing rapid target prioritization during combat when synapse creatures must be eliminated before lesser organisms. The same warrior studying Tau forces learns to identify different battlesuit configurations and the tactical roles each variant fulfills, enabling effective targeting decisions when engaging Xenos mechanized units. The weapons training provided to Deathwatch battle brothers emphasizes proficiency with specialized equipment that many chapters rarely employ. A warrior whose chapter favors bolters and chainswords learns to effectively utilize plasma weapons, meltaguns, and heavy flamers, understanding the tactical applications and limitations of each weapon system. Training with Xenos equipment that has received inquisitorial sanctioning familiarizes battle brothers with alien weapon characteristics and operating principles, preparing them to employ captured Xenos arms when tactical situations warrant. The extensive ammunition variety maintained in Deathwatch armories requires training in selecting appropriate rounds for specific targets, with battle brothers learning to assess whether Hellfire rounds, Kraken penetrators, or Dragonfire bolts will prove most effective against anticipated enemies. The combat doctrine that emerges from this combination of diverse chapter tactics and specialized Deathwatch training emphasizes aggressive initiative and rapid exploitation of enemy vulnerabilities. Kill teams operate with understanding that their small size makes prolonged engagements disadvantageous, as even successful defensive actions against numerically superior Xenos forces will eventually result in ammunition exhaustion or equipment failures that compromise combat effectiveness. The preferred approach involves identifying enemy weaknesses through reconnaissance and intelligence analysis, striking decisively at critical points that maximize disruption, and withdrawing before enemy forces can organize effective responses. This methodology requires confidence in individual battle brothers' capabilities and trust that team members will execute their assigned roles without requiring constant supervision or detailed instructions. The absence of rigid tactical doctrine allows kill teams to adapt their approaches according to the specific characteristics of enemies they face and environments where operations occur. A team conducting operations in the confined corridors of a space hulk employs fundamentally different tactics than the same team operating across open terrain on a frontier world. The Hulk environment favors close-quarters weapons and careful room-clearing procedures that prevent ambush by enemies lurking in unexplored sections. The open terrain permits long-range engagement and maneuver warfare that exploits superior Space Marine mobility and marksmanship. The kill team leader assesses environmental factors and enemy capabilities, then directs team members to employ whatever combination of their diverse skills best suits the immediate tactical situation. The preservation of gene seed represents one of the most sacred duties entrusted to Deathwatch apothecaries, a responsibility that transcends even the organization's primary mission of Xenos extermination. Every Space Marine carries within his body 2 progenitor glands, organs that mature over years of service and contain the genetic template necessary to create new battle brothers. These glands belong not to the Deathwatch, but to the parent chapter that originally implanted them, making their recovery and return a matter of profound importance that affects the long-term survival of chapters whose recruitment rates barely replace combat losses. An apothecary who fails to recover gene seed from a fallen battle brother does not merely lose valuable biological material, but potentially condemns his brother's chapter to a future where they cannot maintain their numbers against the Imperium's endless wars. The practical challenges of gene seed recovery during Deathwatch operations far exceed those faced by chapter apothecaries operating with conventional company strength forces. A standard Space Marine company conducting a planetary assault maintains dedicated medical facilities where apothecaries can properly extract and preserve progenitor glands from fallen warriors, with armored transports available to evacuate casualties to secure locations. Deathwatch kill teams operate without such support infrastructure, conducting missions deep in Xenos territory where extraction of wounded or dead battle brothers proves tactically impossible. An apothecary accompanying a kill team into a Tyranid-infested hive ship understands that recovering gene seed might require remaining behind while his brothers withdraw, or that tactical necessity might force the team to abandon fallen warriors whose progenitors cannot be retrieved without compromising the mission. The equipment carried by Deathwatch apothecaries reflects these operational realities, incorporating specialized tools designed for rapid gene seed extraction under combat conditions. The reductor, a surgical device mounted on the apothecary's gauntlet, can pierce through power armor and extract progenitor glands in less than a minute when properly employed. Stasis containers preserve extracted gene seed in conditions that prevent degradation, even during extended operations in hostile environments. Their internal mechanisms maintaining precise temperature and atmospheric conditions regardless of external factors. Some apothecaries carry multiple stasis containers, recognizing that kill team operations might result in casualties from several different chapters, whose gene seed requires separate preservation to prevent any possibility of cross-contamination. The psychological burden carried by apothecaries serving in the Deathwatch extends beyond the medical responsibilities common to their position in any chapter. These warriors must maintain the clinical detachment necessary to function effectively during combat, while simultaneously honoring the profound significance of the gene seed they safeguard. An apothecary watching a battle brother die in combat experiences not only the loss of a warrior he has fought beside, but also the knowledge that failure to recover that brother's progenoids might affect his chapter for generations. The seconds required to extract gene seed represent moments when the apothecary cannot provide covering fire or support his surviving team members, creating tactical vulnerabilities that could result in additional casualties. The decision calculus involved in determining when gene seed recovery justifies accepting increased risk to the kill team requires judgment that even veteran apothecaries sometimes struggle to exercise with confidence. The return of recovered gene seed to parent chapters follows protocols established through millennia of cooperation between the Deathwatch and the broader Adeptus Astartes. Watch Fortress apothecaries maintain secure facilities where extracted progenoids undergo testing to verify their purity and ensure that exposure to Xenos bioweapons or environmental contaminants has not compromised their genetic integrity. The testing process employs sophisticated equipment capable of detecting mutations at the molecular level, identifying any deviations from the original genetic template that might indicate corruption or degradation. Gene seed that passes these purity tests receives certification from both the Watch Fortress Apothecary and representatives of the Mechanicus Biologics, providing documentation that assures receiving chapters of the progenoid's viability for implantation into new recruits. The physical transfer of gene seed back to parent chapters typically occurs through formal ceremonies that acknowledge the sacrifice of fallen battle brothers and the Deathwatch's fulfillment of its sacred obligation to preserve chapter genetic legacies. Representatives from the receiving chapter travel to the Watch Fortress where their fallen brother served, participating in rituals that honor the dead warrior's service to both his chapter and the Long Vigil. The chapter representatives receive not only the recovered gene seed, but also detailed accounts of how their brother died, the missions he completed, and the Xenos threats he helped eliminate. These accounts provide the chapter with information that allows them to properly commemorate their fallen warrior and incorporate his deeds into their historical records, ensuring that his sacrifice receives recognition within his chapter's traditions, even though he died while wearing Deathwatch black. The complications that arise when gene seed cannot be recovered create difficult situations that strain relationships between the Deathwatch and parent chapters. A chapter master who sends a veteran warrior to serve the Long Vigil expects that warrior's progenoids will return even if the battle brother himself does not survive his service. When a kill team suffers casualties in circumstances that prevent gene seed recovery, the Watch commander must explain to the affected chapters why their genetic legacy suffered permanent loss. These explanations require careful diplomacy and detailed documentation of the tactical circumstances that made recovery impossible, as chapter masters understandably view gene seed loss with extreme gravity. A chapter already struggling to maintain its numbers might regard the permanent loss of a veteran's progenoids as damage to their long-term viability that exceeds even the tactical value of whatever mission objective necessitated the sacrifice. The tensions between battle brothers from rival or philosophically opposed chapters represent one of the most significant challenges facing Deathwatch leadership, as warriors who have spent their entire lives viewing certain other chapters with suspicion or hostility must suddenly cooperate as brothers in the Long Vigil. The ancient animosity between the Dark Angels and Space Wolves stems from incidents during the Horus Heresy, whose details remain known only to the highest ranks of both chapters. But the hatred this history generates affects every battle brother who wears their colors. A Dark Angel serving in a kill team alongside a Space Wolf must suppress instincts honed through centuries of chapter tradition that mark the wolf as inherently untrustworthy. The Space Wolf faces identical challenges, his chapter's culture teaching him that Dark Angels hide shameful secrets and cannot be relied upon when circumstances grow desperate. The practical management of these inter-chapter tensions requires watch captains to exercise careful judgment when assembling kill teams, balancing the tactical advantages of including particular specialists against the interpersonal complications their presence might create. A watch captain planning an operation requiring both a Dark Angel's expertise with plasma weapons and a Space Wolf's close quarters combat capabilities must assess whether these battle brothers can function effectively together or whether their mutual antagonism will compromise the team's cohesion. Some watch captains deliberately pair warriors from rival chapters during training exercises, forcing them to develop working relationships before deploying on actual operations where personality conflicts could prove fatal. Others maintain strict separation between certain chapter combinations, recognizing that some animosities run too deep for even the Deathwatch's unifying purpose to overcome. The enforcement of discipline when inter-chapter conflicts escalate beyond verbal sparring falls to Deathwatch chaplains, who must navigate the complex task of maintaining order without showing favoritism toward any particular chapter's perspective. A chaplain investigating a physical confrontation between a Black Templar and an Ultramarine over doctrinal disagreements about the Codex Astartes must determine appropriate consequences that satisfy both warriors' chapters while preserving the Deathwatch's authority to discipline its members. The chaplain cannot simply defer to one chapter's interpretation of proper conduct, as doing so would undermine his credibility with battle brothers from other chapters, and suggest that the Deathwatch favors certain genetic lineages over others. Instead, he must find common ground in the shared oaths that all battle brothers swear upon joining the organization, emphasizing that service to the Long Vigil requires setting aside chapter prejudices in favor of collective purpose. The positive aspects of inter-chapter cooperation emerge most clearly during extended operations, where battle brothers from different backgrounds learn to appreciate capabilities and perspectives that their own chapter's traditions do not emphasize. An Imperial Fist accustomed to his chapter's defensive expertise discovers that the White Scar's mobile warfare doctrine offers solutions to tactical problems that static defense cannot address. A Salamander whose chapter prioritizes civilian protection gains understanding of why the Marines' malevolence willingness to accept collateral damage sometimes achieves strategic objectives that more restrained approaches cannot accomplish. These revelations do not erase chapter loyalties or transform warriors into advocates for foreign doctrines, but they create appreciation for tactical diversity and recognition that the Imperium benefits from maintaining chapters with different specializations and philosophical approaches. The bonds that develop between battle brothers who survive multiple deployments together often transcend chapter rivalries, creating personal relationships that persist even after warriors return to their parent organizations. A Dark Angel and Space Wolf who fought side by side through a dozen kill team operations develop mutual respect based on shared combat experience rather than chapter propaganda about ancient grievances. When these warriors eventually return to their chapters, they carry memories of cooperation that complicate their chapter's traditional narratives about why certain other chapters deserve suspicion or contempt. Some returning veterans become advocates for improved inter-chapter relations, though they must express these views carefully to avoid accusations of having been corrupted by exposure to foreign doctrines during their Deathwatch service. The unique perspective gained by Deathwatch veterans represents one of the organization's most significant but least quantifiable contributions to the broader Adeptus Astartes. Battle brothers who complete tour with the Deathwatch return to their chapters carrying expertise in Xenos fighting that few other warriors possess, having encountered alien species that their chapters rarely face and employed specialized tactics developed specifically for countering particular Xenos threats. A veteran returning to the Ultramarines after 5 years serving in Watch Fortress Iriok brings detailed knowledge of Tyrannid bioform capabilities, Tau battlesuit tactics, and Orc psychological vulnerabilities that he can share with his battle brothers through training exercises and tactical briefings. His chapter benefits from his experience without having to dedicate its own forces to developing this expertise through costly trial and error. The broader Imperial awareness that Deathwatch service cultivates affects returning veterans in ways that extend beyond simple tactical knowledge. Battle brothers who serve in the Deathwatch operate alongside warriors from dozens of different chapters, each bringing different interpretations of Imperial doctrine and different understandings of the Imperium's strategic situation. A space wolf who spent his entire career before Deathwatch service operating within his chapter's unique cultural context gains exposure to how Ultramarines interpret the Imperial Creed, how Blood Angels understand their duty to the Emperor, and how Iron Hands view the relationship between flesh and machine. This exposure does not transform the space wolf into something other than what his chapter made him, but it provides context that helps him understand that his chapter's perspective represents one valid interpretation among many rather than the only correct understanding of what it means to serve the Imperium. The integration of Deathwatch veterans back into their parent chapters sometimes proceeds smoothly, but occasionally generates complications when returning warriors struggle to readjust to their chapters, command structures, and operational tempo. A battle brother who spent years operating in small kill teams with significant tactical autonomy might find it difficult to return to company-level operations, where individual initiative receives less emphasis than coordinated execution of predetermined battle plans. The veteran's experience leading mixed chapter teams and making independent tactical decisions creates expectations about his role in combat that his chapter's more rigid hierarchy cannot always accommodate. Chapter leadership must decide whether to leverage these veterans' enhanced capabilities by granting them positions of increased responsibility, or to require them to reintegrate into standard squad structures despite their advanced expertise. The special considerations required for battle brothers from chapters with genetic instabilities create additional complexities in Deathwatch operations, as these warriors carry physiological vulnerabilities that their parent chapters understand, but that watch captains from other genetic lineages might not fully appreciate. The Blood Angels and their successor chapters bear the twin curses of the Red Thirst and the Black Rage, genetic flaws that cause affected battle brothers to experience overwhelming bloodlust or to believe themselves fighting in battles from the Horus Heresy. These afflictions manifest unpredictably, with some warriors serving their entire lives without experiencing symptoms, while others succumb during their first major combat engagement. A Blood Angel serving in a Deathwatch kill team carries the constant awareness that he might lose control during battle, potentially endangering his team members or compromising the mission through uncontrolled aggression. The management protocols for Blood Angels serving in the Deathwatch require watch captains to maintain awareness of warning signs that indicate a warrior might be succumbing to the Red Thirst or Black Rage. Increased aggression during combat, difficulty disengaging from melee, or references to battles and enemies from the Horus Heresy all suggest that the genetic curse is manifesting. The watch captain must decide whether to immediately extract the affected warrior from operations, or to continue employing him while the symptoms remain manageable, balancing the tactical value of retaining an experienced team member against the risks his condition poses. Some watch captains develop working relationships with Blood Angels veterans, where both parties acknowledge the genetic flaw openly and establish protocols for managing symptoms if they emerge during operations. The Space Wolves present different challenges due to the Canny's helix, a unique aspect of their gene seed that grants enhanced senses and physical capabilities, but also carries risks of genetic instability. The helix sometimes causes battle brothers to develop increasingly feral characteristics, with affected warriors experiencing heightened aggression and reduced impulse control. The Space Wolves themselves view these changes as natural consequences of their gene seed rather than flaws requiring correction, their chapter culture celebrating the savage ferocity that the Canny's helix enables. Deathwatch leadership must accommodate this perspective, while ensuring that Space Wolf battle brothers remain capable of the discipline and tactical restraint that kill team operations require. A Space Wolf, whose Canny's helix manifestation has progressed to the point where he struggles to follow orders or maintain fire discipline, becomes a liability regardless of his combat prowess. The apothecaries assigned to monitor battle brothers with genetic instabilities face the delicate task of assessing these warriors' fitness for continued service, without appearing to question their parent chapter's recruitment and screening processes. An apothecary who recommends returning a blood angel to his chapter due to concerns about the red thirst must document his reasoning carefully to avoid suggesting that the blood angels themselves failed to properly evaluate their warrior's suitability for Deathwatch service. The apothecary's assessment must focus on objective observations of behavior and physiological indicators, rather than making broader judgments about the viability of the affected chapter's gene seed. This diplomatic approach maintains productive relationships with chapters whose genetic legacies carry known flaws, while still protecting the Deathwatch's operational effectiveness. The philosophical debates that occur within the Deathwatch regarding acceptable levels of genetic deviation from the Emperor's original template reflect broader tensions within the Adeptus Astartes about purity and adaptation. Some battle brothers argue that chapters with significant genetic instabilities should provide fewer warriors to the Deathwatch, or that affected individuals should receive assignments to less critical operations, where their potential loss of control poses reduced risk. Others contend that genetic diversity among Space Marine chapters represents strength rather than weakness, with each lineage's unique characteristics providing capabilities that pure gene seed might not enable. These debates rarely reach definitive conclusions, as the Deathwatch cannot afford to refuse contributions from any chapter willing to honor the tithe, while simultaneously recognizing that some genetic lineages require additional oversight to employ safely. The Black Dragons present an extreme example of genetic divergence, their battle brothers developing bone growths that protrude through their skin and can be employed as natural weapons in close combat. The chapter views these mutations as gifts that enhance combat effectiveness, but many other chapters regard the Black Dragons with suspicion and question whether their gene seed remains pure enough to qualify them as true Adeptus Astartes. Black Dragons serving in the Deathwatch face prejudice from battle brothers, whose chapters teach that any deviation from the Emperor's template indicates corruption or taint. Watch captains who include Black Dragons in their kill teams must address these prejudices directly, emphasizing that the Ordo Xenos has sanctioned the chapter's service, and that the mutations demonstrably enhance the affected warrior's combat capabilities against certain Xenos threats. The return of gene seed from chapters declared excommunicate traitores creates situations with no satisfactory resolution, as the Deathwatch cannot return progenoids to organizations that the Imperium has condemned as heretical. When a chapter falls to chaos or suffers censure severe enough to warrant excommunication, any of their battle brothers currently serving in the Deathwatch face immediate detention and interrogation to determine whether they participated in or possessed knowledge of their chapter's corruption. The gene seed of these warriors, along with any progenoids recovered from fallen battle brothers before their chapter's condemnation, enters permanent storage in Watch Fortress vaults under inquisitorial seal. The Mechanicus occasionally requests access to these samples for research purposes, seeking to understand what genetic factors might predispose chapters toward corruption, but the Inquisition maintains strict control over this material to prevent any possibility of its use in creating new space marines who might carry tainted genetic legacies. The opening of the Great Rift in the closing years of the 41st millennium fundamentally altered the strategic landscape within which the Deathwatch operates, creating challenges that tested the organization's distributed command structure and operational flexibility in ways that no previous crisis had managed. The Cicatrix Maledictum tore reality itself across the galaxy, severing direct communication and travel between vast regions of Imperial space and creating the division between the Imperium Sanctus on Terra's side of the Rift and the Imperium Nihilus beyond it. Watch fortresses that had maintained regular contact with Deathwatch command elements and their Ordo Xenos overseers suddenly found themselves isolated, cut off from the coordination networks that had enabled the organization to function as a unified force rather than a collection of independent installations pursuing their own operational priorities. The immediate impact on watch fortresses located in what became the Imperium Nihilus proved catastrophic in some cases and merely severe in others, depending on each installation's strategic position and the Xenos' threats active in their operational theaters. Watch Fortress Furor, positioned near the Natchman Gauntlet, found itself on the front lines of the largest concentration of stable warp routes crossing the Great Rift, making it a critical choke point that both Imperial and Xenos forces sought to control. The fortress garrison faced intensified attacks from multiple alien species seeking to exploit the chaos caused by the Rift's opening, with chaos-corrupted forces adding an additional threat dimension that the Deathwatch had not anticipated when planning defensive protocols for a facility designed primarily to counter Xenos incursions. Watch Commander Castor led the defense with resources stretched beyond sustainable limits, his kill teams conducting operations across dozens of systems simultaneously, while the fortress itself withstood repeated assaults from enemies that seemed to emerge from the warp storms surrounding the gauntlet with disturbing regularity. Other watch fortresses in the Imperium Nihilus faced isolation that prevented them from receiving reinforcements or resupply from the broader Deathwatch organization, forcing watch commanders to make difficult decisions about which operations to continue and which Xenos threats to ignore due to insufficient resources. The tithe of warriors from parent chapters that had sustained Deathwatch operations for millennia stopped flowing to installations beyond the Rift, as chapters themselves struggled with the disruptions caused by the Cicatrix Maledictum and could not spare veterans for secondment when their own fortress monasteries faced existential threats. Watch fortresses began operating more like independent Space Marine chapters than components of a unified organization, their watch commanders assuming authority that previously would have required consultation with Inquisitor lords who could no longer communicate across the Rift's turbulent warp storms. The resourcefulness demonstrated by isolated watch fortresses during this period revealed the strength of the Deathwatch's institutional culture and the quality of leadership among its veteran commanders. Watch Fortress Thalassa Prime, one of the oldest Deathwatch installations, maintained operations through careful resource management and creative solutions to equipment shortages that would have crippled less experienced organizations. Tech Marines assigned to Thalassa Prime developed techniques for maintaining specialized weapons without access to Mechanicus supply chains, reverse engineering ammunition production for exotic bolt rounds, and fabricating replacement parts for equipment that normally required Forge World manufacturing capabilities. The fortress's apothecaries established protocols for extending the operational lifespan of battle brothers, whose injuries would typically require extensive augmetic reconstruction, implementing field expedient solutions that kept warriors' combat effective even when proper medical facilities remained unavailable. The strategic coordination that the Deathwatch had previously taken for granted became impossible across the Great Rift's expanse, forcing watch commanders to operate based on local intelligence and their own tactical assessments rather than receiving guidance from the broader organizational command structure. A watch captain planning operations against a Tyranid splinter fleet could no longer consult with specialists at other watch fortresses who possessed relevant experience, instead relying entirely on his own installation's archives and the expertise of whatever battle brothers happened to be assigned to his fortress when the rift opened. This isolation encouraged innovation as watch commanders developed new tactical approaches suited to their specific circumstances, but it also resulted in duplication of effort and missed opportunities for coordination that might have achieved greater strategic effects if communication networks had remained functional. The arrival of Primaris Space Marines in Deathwatch ranks began gradually during the Indomitus Crusade, as Robute Guilliman's forces pushed into regions that had suffered under Xenos' predation during the centuries of isolation following the rift's opening. These new warriors, created using improved gene seed techniques that Archmagos Dominus Belisarius Call had developed during 10,000 years of secret research, brought capabilities that exceeded those of traditional Space Marines in several key areas. Primaris Marines stood taller than their predecessors, their enhanced physiology incorporating additional organs that granted improved endurance and resilience. Their standard weapons included bolt rifles with greater range and penetration than conventional bolt guns, and their armor incorporated design improvements that provided better protection while maintaining mobility. The integration of these warriors into Deathwatch operations required significant adjustments to tactical doctrines and kill team compositions that had remained relatively stable for millennia. The initial deployments of Primaris Marines to watch fortresses generated mixed reactions from veteran battle brothers who had served the Long Vigil for decades using equipment and tactics proven through centuries of combat against every major Xeno species. Some veterans welcomed the enhanced capabilities that Primaris warriors brought, recognizing that their superior firepower and durability would prove valuable during operations against heavily armed Xenos forces like Necrons or Tau battlesuits. Others viewed the newcomers with suspicion, questioning whether warriors who lacked the extensive combat experience typical of battle brothers selected for Deathwatch service could adapt to the organization's demanding operational requirements. A Primaris Marine might possess superior physical capabilities compared to a traditional battle brother, but experience fighting Xenos threats required knowledge that could only be gained through years of combat against diverse alien species in varied operational environments. The tactical integration of Primaris Marines into existing kill team structures presented practical challenges that watch captains addressed through careful assessment of each warrior's capabilities and limitations. The enhanced range of Primaris bolt rifles made these warriors valuable for engaging targets at distances where traditional bolt guns proved less effective, but their lack of familiarity with specialized Deathwatch ammunition types sometimes resulted in suboptimal tactical decisions. A Primaris Marine accustomed to the standardized ammunition employed by Ultima founding chapters might not immediately recognize situations where switching to Hellfire rounds or Kraken penetrators would prove more effective than continuing to fire standard bolts. Watch captains assigned experienced veterans to mentor newly arrived Primaris warriors, pairing them with battle brothers who could share the institutional knowledge that the Deathwatch had accumulated regarding Xenos combat. The equipment issued to Primaris Marines serving in the Deathwatch included specialized variants of their standard wargear, modified to incorporate the organization's signature weapons and capabilities. Primaris intercessors received training with Stalker pattern bolt rifles configured for precision engagement of priority targets, their enhanced strength allowing them to manage the recoil of these powerful weapons more effectively than traditional Marines. Primaris aggressors equipped with Flamestorm gauntlets proved particularly effective during operations against Tyranid swarms or orc mobs, their ability to project continuous streams of burning promethium while maintaining mobility, creating tactical options that traditional heavy weapons teams could not match. The Inceptors, Primaris Marines equipped with jump packs and assault bolters, provided kill teams with rapid response capabilities that complemented the more methodical approaches typical of Deathwatch operations. The creation of entirely Primaris kill teams represented a departure from traditional Deathwatch practice, as these formations operated without the mixed chapter composition that had characterized the organization since its founding. Watch captains assembling these teams faced different considerations than when building traditional kill teams, as all team members possessed similar physical capabilities and equipment loadouts, rather than the diverse specializations that battle brothers from different chapters typically brought. The standardization of Primaris capabilities simplified some aspects of tactical planning, as watch captains could expect consistent performance levels across all team members rather than accounting for the varying strengths and weaknesses of warriors from different genetic lineages. However, this uniformity also reduced the tactical flexibility that diverse chapter backgrounds had previously enabled, requiring watch captains to develop new doctrines that leveraged Primaris strengths while compensating for their relative lack of specialization. The Xenos threats that intensified following the Great Rift's opening tested both traditional and Primaris Deathwatch forces in ways that revealed the changing strategic landscape across the Imperium. Orc empires that had been contained through sustained Imperial military pressure suddenly found themselves facing reduced opposition as Imperial forces withdrew to defend more critical systems or simply lost contact with central command authorities. Warbosses who had struggled to unite sufficient greenskin mobs to threaten major Imperial worlds now found their WAGHs. Growing to unprecedented sizes as orcs from across entire sectors rallied to leaders whose reputations spread through the psychic gestalt field that all greenskins generated. The beast arises level threats that had seemed like historical anomalies began appearing with disturbing frequency, forcing the Deathwatch to dedicate significant resources to decapitation strikes against orc leadership, even as other Xenos species simultaneously increased their pressure on Imperial territories. The Tyrannid threat evolved in ways that suggested the hive mind had adapted its strategies in response to the changed galactic conditions, with new hive fleet tendrils emerging from intergalactic space at an accelerated pace that overwhelmed Imperial early warning systems. The traditional pattern of vanguard organisms establishing genestealer cult beachheads before main fleet elements arrived gave way to more aggressive approaches where bioships translated directly into contested systems and began immediate planetary consumption. This tactical shift reduced the window during which Deathwatch kill teams could intervene to prevent infestations from establishing themselves, forcing watch commanders to prioritize rapid response capabilities over the careful reconnaissance operations that had previously characterized anti-Tyrannid doctrine. The increased tempo of Tyrannid incursions strained Deathwatch resources across multiple sectors simultaneously, with watch fortresses receiving requests for kill team support faster than they could deploy available forces. The awakening of Necron tomb worlds accelerated dramatically in the wake of the Great Rift's opening, as if the massive warp disturbance had triggered ancient awakening protocols across thousands of dormant installations. Worlds that had shown no signs of Necron presence suddenly erupted with warrior cohorts emerging from underground crypts, their living metal bodies reforming after millions of years in stasis. The Deathwatch found itself responding to Necron incursions in regions where these ancient Xenos had never previously appeared, with kill teams conducting hasty reconnaissance of tomb complexes, whose configurations and defensive systems differed from documented examples in Deathwatch archives. The technological sophistication demonstrated by some awakening dynasties exceeded anything Imperial forces had previously encountered, with weapons that manipulated fundamental forces in ways that suggested either significant advancement during the Necron's long sleep or the activation of capabilities that earlier encounters had not revealed. The return of Robute Guilliman to active command of Imperial military forces created opportunities for enhanced coordination between the Deathwatch and other Imperial organizations, as the returned Primarch possessed both the authority and the strategic vision necessary to implement reforms that had languished for millennia under the bureaucratic inertia of the High Lords of Terra. Guilliman's direct involvement in military planning brought the Deathwatch into closer coordination with Space Marine chapters prosecuting the Indomitus Crusade, with Watch commanders receiving regular intelligence briefings about Crusade operations and opportunities to deploy kill teams in support of larger Imperial offensives. This coordination represented a significant improvement over the previous system, where Deathwatch operations occurred largely independently of broader Imperial strategic planning, with kill teams sometimes conducting missions in systems where their parent chapters were simultaneously operating without either force possessing awareness of the other's presence. The Ultimaris decree issued by Guilliman formalized the relationship between the Deathwatch and the newly founded Primaris-only chapters created from Call's genetic work, establishing protocols for these chapters' participation in the tithe of warriors that sustain Deathwatch operations. The decree recognized that Primaris chapters, lacking the centuries of institutional experience possessed by older chapters, required different approaches to selecting warriors for Deathwatch service. Rather than seconding veterans with decades of combat experience, Primaris chapters would provide warriors who had completed their initial training and combat trials, with the Deathwatch itself assuming responsibility for developing their expertise in Xenos combat through intensive training programs at Watch fortresses. This arrangement ensured that Primaris chapters could fulfill their tithe obligations without depleting their limited pools of experienced warriors, while simultaneously providing the Deathwatch with a steady flow of capable battle brothers whose enhanced physical capabilities suited them well for the organization's demanding operations. The enhanced coordination between chapters and the Ordo Xenos that Guilliman mandated created formal mechanisms for sharing intelligence about Xenos threats and coordinating responses that leveraged both organizations' capabilities. Watch commanders gained access to chapter intelligence networks that provided early warning of Xenos movements in regions where the Deathwatch maintained limited presence, while chapters received detailed threat assessments compiled from Deathwatch combat experience against specific alien species. A chapter preparing to engage a Tyranid splinter fleet could request tactical consultation from Deathwatch specialists who had fought similar organisms, receiving recommendations about effective weapons loadouts and tactical approaches based on documented combat performance rather than theoretical assessments. This information sharing multiplied the effectiveness of both organizations, allowing chapters to avoid costly mistakes that the Deathwatch had already learned to prevent through hard experience. The strategic doctrine that emerged during the Indomitus Crusade emphasized aggressive counter-offensives against Xenos forces that had expanded into Imperial territory during the chaos following the Great Rift's opening, with the Deathwatch playing a crucial role in identifying priority targets whose elimination would facilitate broader Imperial advances. Kill teams conducted deep reconnaissance into Xenos-held systems, gathering intelligence about enemy force dispositions and infrastructure that allowed Crusade commanders to plan operations with better understanding of what opposition they would face. The elimination of Xenos leadership elements through precision strikes created opportunities for Imperial forces to advance into regions that would have required far greater resources to conquer if enemy command structures had remained intact. A successful Deathwatch operation that killed a Tau commander coordinating defenses across an entire subsector might enable Imperial Guard regiments to reclaim a dozen worlds that would otherwise have required sustained siege operations consuming years of effort. The Torchbearer fleets that Guilliman dispatched across the galaxy to deliver Primaris reinforcements to existing chapters included Deathwatch contingents tasked with assessing each chapter's specific needs and operational circumstances. These assessment teams evaluated how effectively chapters could integrate Primaris warriors into their existing command structures, and whether their traditional combat doctrines required modification to fully utilize the enhanced capabilities that Primaris Marines provided. The intelligence gathered through these assessments fed back into Deathwatch planning, helping Watch commanders understand how different chapters were adapting to the changing strategic situation and what specialized capabilities newly reinforced chapters might be able to contribute when their battle brothers eventually arrived for Deathwatch service. The Watch fortresses themselves underwent significant expansion and modernization during the Indomitus Crusade, as Imperial resources became available for infrastructure improvements that had been deferred during the resource-constrained centuries preceding Guilliman's return. Facilities designed to accommodate traditional space marines received modifications to properly house Primaris warriors, whose increased size required larger quarters and training spaces. Armories expanded to stock the new weapons patterns that Primaris Marines employed, with Tech Marines learning to maintain and repair equipment whose designs incorporated technological principles that differed from traditional Astartes wargear. The xenobiology sections received enhanced containment systems capable of safely housing specimens from newly encountered Xenos species, with research protocols updated to incorporate techniques that Magos Biologas adepts had developed during their study of Tyranid adaptation mechanisms. The philosophical debates within the Deathwatch about the organization's role in the broader Imperial military structure intensified as the scale of Xenos threats facing the Imperium became increasingly apparent. Some Watch commanders argued that the Deathwatch should maintain its traditional focus on precision operations against specific high-value targets, preserving the organization's specialized capabilities for missions that conventional Imperial forces could not accomplish. Others contended that the severity of Xenos threats in the era Indomitus required the Deathwatch to accept a more direct combat role, deploying larger forces for sustained operations rather than limiting itself to small kill team actions. The resolution of this debate remained incomplete, with different Watch fortresses adopting different approaches based on their local circumstances and the preferences of their commanders. The legacy of the Deathwatch's response to the challenges of the era Indomitus will likely shape the organization's development for centuries to come, as the adaptations made during this period of crisis become embedded in institutional practice and doctrine. The integration of Primaris Marines represents an irreversible change that will fundamentally alter kill team composition and capabilities, as traditional battle brothers gradually cycle out of service through casualties and returns to their parent chapters. The enhanced coordination with other Imperial military organizations creates dependencies and expectations that will persist even if the immediate crisis that necessitated closer cooperation eventually subsides. The strategic lessons learned through combat against intensified Xenos threats will inform Deathwatch tactical doctrine and training programs, ensuring that future generations of battle brothers benefit from the hard-won experience of warriors who fought during humanity's darkest hours since the Horus Heresy. The Deathwatch stands as one of the Imperium's most vital bulwarks against the endless Xenos threats that seek to extinguish humanity's light across the galaxy. From the Watch fortresses scattered throughout Imperial space to the kill teams operating in the deepest darkness beyond the Imperium's borders, the organization prosecutes a war that receives little recognition, but whose importance cannot be overstated. Every Xenos leader eliminated, every alien infiltration detected and purged, every specimen studied and cataloged in the xenobiology archives represents another small victory in a conflict that will continue as long as humanity survives among the stars. The battle brothers who serve the Long Vigil sacrifice their chapter identities and sometimes their lives in service to a cause that transcends any single organization's glory, standing watch against threats that most Imperial citizens will never know existed. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, the Deathwatch ensures that humanity retains the specialized knowledge and capabilities necessary to face whatever horrors the galaxy's alien inhabitants devise, maintaining eternal vigilance against the Xenos that would see mankind erased from existence.